Great. Well, welcome to this Friday, one of the last ones in March. Thanks for joining us. We're here with long-term friend of Precision Golf, Dan Owen. We've gone through this about 4 times, I'm going to get it wrong. Editor at Golf Retailing and equipment editor at Golf News.
Yes, and I think I saw you at your original location, which would have been what, 2008?
Yeah, we were there between 05 and 2015. Yeah.
But maybe earlier than 2005, 2006.
If it was just the one building, it was pre-2007.
Yeah, it would have been. So yeah, we've known each other a long time.
Ago.
Almost as nerdy as these guys when it comes to equipment.
Yeah, you definitely tell us about certain things, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Dan is a great font of information, especially at the PGA show. Whenever we drop into you, he said, have you seen this?
Yeah, there was some good stuff this year. It wasn't great, but there was some good stuff.
Yeah, I think it was nice to see, having not been for a couple of years, it was nice busy.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of, there were clearly areas that would have been filled with stands in previous years, but actually it wasn't as much restaurant and sort of dead space as I thought.
No, although I did miss
quite a nice buzz with it.
I did miss the buggy at the back taking you from one end to the other. Although you probably never end up in the apparel end.
No, that's the big end at the. Yeah, we never go that side. Yeah, that's way bigger than the equipment part.
Yeah,
of it. Yeah,
huge business.
Yeah, not disappointed not to do that, but. So, obviously, joining us for a fit today, you're going to do a live fitting on. I'm going to focus on irons and driver in this bit, and so a bit of history about where your set is at the moment and what you've been finding and what you want to achieve, really.
Because
not that I'm going to throw too much at you.
Because of what I do, I end up having to try lots of different stuff, and you call in stuff at specs that are roughly going to be right, and sometimes you get fit, but actually coming in here and hitting everything at once. Being fit independently of sort of shaft equipment manufacturer's shaft matrix makes a massive difference. I've had these irons about 4 years, I think that's about right.
And these are the Epic Forge.
Epic Forge.
Yep, Calo Epic Forge. Worn out shirt.
I haven't played as much the last few years. Wanted something a bit more forgiving. It still looks quite good and a bit of extra ball speed, so I don't swing it that fast. They feel great, but there's a couple of things. Last year I played a few links courses, just bouncing out the turf.
Right, yeah.
Really bouncing out the turf. Also the shaft and those, the stock shafts are a little bit long. I think they're a little bit soft in the tip for me. I don't think the weight's too bad, but I think the other aspects are
And so these, in case you can't see, these are the steel fibre, the flight control 90s. And the flight control is like a flighted rifle, so it's a softer tip. So the steel fibres are traditionally very stable in the tip section. And this is just to get a little bit more pop. And from a mainstream point of view, a little more pop, a little bit more launch.
Yeah,
in principle.
They do exactly what they're meant to do. I just don't need that.
Yeah.
But I played a couple of rounds of golf at the end of last year with a set of Wilson D9 forged. Smaller sole, played up at Birkdale.
Yeah.
I just had a much better time.
Yeah.
So as much as I need a bit of forgiveness and a little bit of help, I think a little bit of ball speed from my irons. When I think back, I played my best golf with small forged irons. So I probably need to go back towards that way a little bit.
Okay. So, and by that, with significance of that last bit is slightly narrower sole, and from a sort of golfing terms, a little bit less bounce, essentially, a little less sole that gets in the way of the contact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm going to take so you grab anything, have a few looseners. What ball do you play? And I'll measure a few bits on these to get a marker.
Again, I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah.
I was with Titleist last year. They wanted me to use Pro V1X because of more spin around the greens, because they said I didn't generate huge amounts of spin around the greens.
Okay.
My instinct is always to go for something that'll go further. So, sort of the opposite to that. So I really don't know.
So would you be, if you were going to play today, what would you play on course?
I would probably go towards Pro V1.
Pro V1, okay, yeah.
Or Z-Star XV or Diamond.
Okay.
Just because in my head, I don't feel like I hit the ball far enough. I know they're going to generate a little bit more. And I know we're only talking a couple of yards, but it's the one thing I notice, especially when you play with young golfs now, they all hit it so far.
Yeah.
At Lytham,
that's very true. Yeah.
18th at Lytham was a par 5. I hit 3-wood in, made my birdie. Someone in the group hit 8-iron in.
Oh, Berked up, yeah, 8-iron, yeah. That's a big old,
And it's like, there's a big difference between 3-wood and 8-iron, even though he didn't make the birdie. I know, but
it's still, the difference is still there. Isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So whilst Dan warms up, I'm just going to measure a few specs on these. So So one of the characteristics of Epic 4s, so this is, and certainly with these, actually quite low spin head.
Low spin, they're fast, they feel good.
Yeah.
But they weren't particularly low launching. And that was exactly what I was looking for, and I don't necessarily think those characteristics are bad. Like, that was so far out the toe.
So get out of the way before we judge.
Exactly.
We're not judging you on the warm-up swings, that's for sure. How often do you generally get to play?
I've got a 2-year-old, so it's really 2-year-old, COVID, and in a position where I don't have a car currently.
Yeah.
Makes golf quite difficult.
All adds up to not a lot.
But because of the job, I end up, when I do play, it's often at really tough golf courses, so I need to bring a decent game.
Yes, a perfect storm, isn't it? Yes, it's all right standing on the first tee with a long iron in hand, just popping one to play on a short par 4, and you get a Wentworth West and you've got a driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've been in golf journalism a long time. Not trying to make you sound old.
I was working this out the other day, and I think it's 2004, because one of my best memories still is 2005, being up at St Andrews, about 12 foot behind Tiger on the Sunday, where he said on press conference after that was the best he'd ever struck the ball. So that's almost my sort of point where I use as a. When did I start? I started the summer before that. Back when Golf Punk was a thing.
Yeah. And as a child, you played from a young age?
11 or 12.
Yeah.
And actually have known some of the guys you've got working here since that age. So Stu, Mark.
Yeah.
I've dealt with Mike before.
Yeah, there are quite a bunch. Yeah, we've got a good team.
One of the advantages I think I've got of playing as a kid, well, I've not had a handicap for years. I'd struggle to tell you what it is. I'd probably tell someone it's probably 12 or 13, but whether it is or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can not play for months and come back and still make a decent pass at the ball. When I see people who've taken up golf later, it's sometimes if they haven't played a while, it looks like they really struggle.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating with golf. You definitely see that. You definitely find that anyone who's played from a young age, the swing kind of retains, whereas you say if you come into it later in life,
they can be much better golfers,
you can still,
but you
have to find the swing if you don't play for a while. Definitely there's more retention of it from starting at a young age. And anything from a swing point of view that you go back to?
I've always played my best golf with no swing thoughts. The only thing I think at the moment is almost to brace against my right foot, the inside of my right foot, because otherwise I seem to drift back and then contact goes all over the place.
Yeah.
If I just sort of hit into...
Keeps you on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what, anything you've seen in particular, not necessarily equipment-wise, but just generally in golf this year that makes you feel kind of most sort of excited about the year, or anything in particular that stands out as looking good? Or just generally of interest?
Well, rounds played still seems to be up. There's still a lot of people out there playing golf, which is great, because who knew after the sort of post-COVID golf boom?
Yeah.
So that's great. A little bit worried about this potential golf ball rollback. Don't think it's a good move.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. I find it interesting that Rory's for it.
I totally get that, because he knows he's a better ball striker than most of them.
Yeah.
If you're
But
same
in
as
terms of for
Tiger,
the game generally, you kind of, why would he? I look at the general game and go,
Yeah.
I don't get the benefit of it. But
if they'd have just announced golf ball development stops now, that to me,
I agree. Yeah.
we just have this, and I get it from the. It still would be problematic for the manufacturers, but you'd know then. And I think that'd be pretty fair. Every 2026 it kicks in. If it kicks in, and golf ball development just stops there, and they're the balls available, or balls that have been released before, and that's all you can buy. That to me makes sense.
Yeah, because I kind of wonder whether the way of, for want of a better phrase, limiting things is more along the aerodynamics lines. You make them less aerodynamically stable, because then a miss hit's punished more. Rather than actually rolling it back, do you necessarily need to, don't punish the good hit, but punish the miss hit more? Something along those lines. But
Yeah, or go
I
back
see
to
you're just creating a barrier between the top echelon and then the next one's back, and I just don't see that being
even a
positive.
I think it'd be less problematic if it was a driver size rollback. So it's a 300cc driver for Tour Pros. That I could get behind. I can understand that. But golf was such a fundamental part of what everyone can use the same equipment. It's a great part of golf.
Yeah.
And if someone wanted to use a 300cc driver, they could.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't cause the same issues. They just have to stripe it.
It's true. Yeah. Like the good old days. Yeah. I think there are bigger issues for golf to work out than that.
We just want people playing. Anything that stops people from playing the game, like, I dress for golf when I go and play golf, but if someone wants to wear a pair of jeans, what offence does it really cause? And maybe not every golf course.
Oh, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but again, you just say if there's golf really, is it more about how one behaves on the course and treats other people and is being respectful of other people on the course, and what you wear doesn't really change that.
No.
It's more about
It's
how
like in
you
America, it's quite a big thing to have music on the golf course.
Yeah.
We wouldn't really think about it here. I think more so because the golf courses are in much smaller pieces of land.
James and I played with someone who we were in Mauritius. There was a speaker in the bucket. I was okay. You didn't like that too much, did you? It wasn't your cup of tea.
I quite like it, but I wouldn't.
mind.
But you'd have to agree it and feel warmed up.
Right. And as we go, any questions? Actually, Dan is a wonderful font of knowledge on all things golf. So any questions anyone's got, they want to send them in. Whether it's about what we're doing in the fitting or about golf in general.
Other than golf fitness.
Please say, well, you might know about it, just choose not to do anything about it. But yeah, anything at all, just send them in, and we'll do our best to answer everything we can. So let's get those. We'll grab the 6. We'll get a bit of base data with this. So as you're saying, Epic Forged. There's a lot of tech in the head. It's a head that, lots of tungsten the sole, lots of face tech.
I would argue from a tech
technologically
standpoint,
very advanced.
It's still the most advanced line they've produced. They might tell me different, but more importantly, actually, although it's quite a big head, it hides the shape well, a bit like PXG. It's got a chamfered top edge.
Yeah. Which a lot are now doing. I think that kind of trend of taking that top edge and chamfering off the back edge, angling the back edge of the crown, just makes it look neater.
Yeah, I lose that left. No, not too bad.
Okay. And what would you generally play? I'll just pull the ball back. It's just in where the mat's just taking a bit of a dip. What would you generally play the 6 for when it's not winter and raining out there like it is now?
Distance-wise,
sort of springtime
it's
yardage.
not. I don't hit the ball very far. I waste a lot of energy. My swing looks quite fast, and it doesn't actually produce much clubhead speed. I'd probably say 160.
160.7 the last one.
It's not. It's something else I want to do is try and get harder a stack and see if it actually helps.
Interesting enough, David, who works with, he's been using that, and there was a jump in his stats after, I can't remember, was it a few weeks, James? I think there was a jump in his speed, but with a particular weight. And what was fascinating with it from our point of view is looking and going, okay, once he got above a certain weight, the speed tailed back down. The lightest one wasn't quite as quick. I think it was the middle one. He after a couple of weeks of doing it, or a few weeks doing it, had a proper jump in speed of that.
Really noticeable. But then there's also taking the jump of speed with that to a golf club, because because I also find I'm more aggressive with my driver swing than my iron swing.
I mean, the roll bit is an impossible ask to know that. But I mean, height-wise, it's only a matter of a few feet. You're looking at maybe a couple of yards because you're looking at 300 revs on spin. So it's, for some players, the higher spin will actually help the ball stay in the air and generate more carry. Others, the lower spin gets the flight more stable and more penetrating and will get more distance that way around. But in terms of actual height, it's under 5 yards. It's probably 3 yards. And I mean, in terms of carry, again, it depends on where your start point is. Again, you're only looking at a few yards for that little difference in spin, but it's more safety net on ball flight. You get too low, and the ball can fall out the sky and get away from you. So it's guarding against that mainly. But yeah, the carry and the roll numbers are, you know, roll 5-6 yards, but whichever one keeps the ball in a more optimal window is going to be the one that carries and rolls furthest, but you're only looking at a couple of yards. Yeah.
And just, I'll butt in a little bit there. If you spend any time with the guys at tight list, they will just want you to use the ball that spins the most around the green generally, or controlled spin around the green. So
because the ball itself doesn't make that.
With a little bit of fitting, you can make either ball work. But so that's
you can do, yeah. And it's, I mean, there are certain players who are naturally a little lower spin. You'd use the X to keep it in the air a little bit more. You might not be able to use loft to optimise. You can use loft and ball type to optimise numbers on irons and woods a little bit, but and there's a feel aspect to it as well. It's not, you know, we play not just with numbers, we play with feel too. So some players just don't like the hardness of a Pro V1 X versus Pro V1. It's a harder core, so that aspect has to come into it as well. So pretty consistent set of numbers there. As you'll see watching Dan swing, is actually he doesn't really deviate too much. So there's very straight ball flight going on here.
And sometimes I'll turn up to the golf course, it'll go a little bit left, sometimes it'll be a little bit right. Generally, it's the left one I'd struggle with.
Yeah. More of a straight, it's fairly straight pull though, isn't it? It's not really shaping.
And I think part of it is probably more body alignment than anything else, but it's just, I just do what I know rather than, I can't remember the last time I had a lesson, for example, so there's no point in trying to change it.
So what we can see from numbers here, as you alluded to earlier, whether we were chatting just before we went online or after we came online, you know, the Epic forged heads, you know, relatively strong loft, 6 irons at 25 degrees, but where you're fairly shallow through the ball and you deliver a fairly neutral loft, so there's not a massive amount of shaft lean there, and that makes you quite strong body turn, quite a quiet hand action through. That's part of what makes you very, very straight because there's not a lot of rotation going on. But what you're getting out of those there, I should have said to Joe to pop it onto the numbers screen. You can see ball speed of the smash at couple at 135, 36s, but then 140, 41s, which are in a good place. And it's that combination launch and spin. As you say, you generate launch. So at 25 degrees to be getting a 18-degree launch, there's plenty of flight there. But these heads will have the spin coming in a little bit lower, a little bit hotter. So actually, from a distance point of view, quite efficient. It's just a question of if we gain a little bit of spin, can we lose a little bit of launch? But head construction is going to do a good chunk of that. You know, because there's a lot of tungsten in the sole, it's going to get under the ball and launch it up and take a bit of spin off. But from an efficiency point of view, really quite efficient. So I think the question was, how much spin can we gain? Can we gain some spin, gain a little bit of control for the upper end of the irons without losing too much on the yardage front? Because that's always the bit of the question mark there. But not far off. I mean, there's in terms of weighting, that's a 90 gram shaft. You can see you and the club move, nicely in sync. There's not a lot of finding the ball going on there. So it's likely to be fine-tuned. And the steel fibres versus steel they kind of hit a bit of a halfway house between an all steel and an all composite shaft. Yeah,
and that's something we've not talked about, but I do like the idea of going with a graphite shaft.
Yeah.
I'm getting older, but it's not even that. I do think there is something to sort of joint pain management and the like with a carbon shaft.
Yeah.
I've hit these. I hit the Axioms out in Orlando.
Yeah, I haven't
I know there's
quite
a whole-
got those yet.
No,
annoyingly.
to be honest, I think they're too heavy and too stiff for me. So,
got it. Oh, they go from 75 to 105. It's quite a big jump in weight there. Yeah.
but you've got a bunch of other options as well. But I've always liked the steel fibre, even though that's probably a 20-year-old shaft at this point.
Yeah, it's actually, just make sure this doesn't tell, it's actually surprising how long that's been around, and without really changing at all.
And I feel people know more about it now than they have at any point before. It seems to become more accessible.
I think part of it is that, so for those that don't know, the construction of the steel fibre shafts is a graphite core with a, how many miles? 3 to 5 miles, I think, might even be longer.
No, it's something like 50 miles.
30 miles, 50 miles of steel filament wrapped around the outside. So 56, sorry. So what the principle is, sort of, it gets the centre of gravity more to the outside of the shaft, creates some stability and technically some MOI, but really it's, from a swinging point of view, structurally very, very stable, really quite a tight feel, but it swings a little less tip heavy than steel, but without losing any of the rigidity. It kind of has a kind of a halfway kind of steel sort of feel, but with the benefits of the composite with a graphite core. So, being around a long time, I think swing techniques becoming more rotational, becoming more speed oriented, has meant that balance point in the 95s and the 110s in particular, not being so tip heavy, suits the modern action. I think that's why we're seeing more and more of them where it's not that kind of pull on the handle, it's more of a rotation. If it gets bottom end heavy, it gets a little more stuck. So it actually helps just to generate speed by rotation. And I think more people are open to playing graphites and composites now.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on it, but it is something I'd definitely steer you towards.
Yeah. Well, and what we'll do, we'll go kind of, I guess, first sort of shaft-wise, we'll go around. I mean, these ones are actually just the standard length for these. I think they're standard
long.
Yeah, so there's 38-inch 6-iron length, and which is a half-inch over current general standard. If we take out any of the sort of exceptional lengths, so things like the XP PXGs are 38.25 as standard because the head's lighter and it's just a distance machine, but a half-inch longer than standard currently. And I guess that's one of the elements in terms of strike consistency, control. That's something we'll have a look at. But I'll start looking at some shafts. I'll look at a standard length and see what changes and whether the angle of attack changes, flight changes. But we'll start off with shafts, get that zoned in, then have a look at some heads.
Perfect.
Right. I'll get. Is there a head that you'd like to start with?
I really like the look of the MP225.
Cool. No problem at all.
I think that's the right balance point of sort of forgiveness.
Yeah, it's got quite a clean sole. It's not too cambered on the sole as well. So I'll get that head as a baseline. And it should, for what Dan wants to do with the flight, it should also help retain a little bit of spin as well. So the Mizuno heads aren't as bomber-like. So I'm going to get a few options. And you get a kind of similar weight steel to what Dan's playing now. And a couple of alternatives in the composites as well. So, steel fibre 95. I'll get. I'm actually the NMTs I'm not going to use. Just with Dan's action, the last thing I want to do is go very tip heavy like these ones are. So those will just throw the timing completely off. So that's one that's not a relevant one to check out. I'm going to do the ICWTs from Africa as well as a base. So we'll start with these. Let's go into the steel first. Right. So first combo, the MP225 head and going the KBS Tour Light. So starting at the 95 gram weight. So the way the Tour Lights work is that they go from 95 in the Verticom as regular, 100 in the stiff, 105 in the X. But I want to start with a similar weight to what you've got, just as a sort of base point. Just change the construction rather than try and shift weight too much.
I think part of the problem I've always had with equipment is I know a lot, but there's a big difference from knowing a lot to actually the ins and outs of an actual fitting. So
it's yeah, I think the thing is, the more we've done this, the more theory's great,
yeah,
but in practice, it's just got to work. And just because a shaft manufacturer or a head manufacturer says, "Oh, it's designed for this, it's designed for that," that's all relative to their own range or what they want it to be seen to be.
yeah.
Where they want to pitch
There's a
it
lot
within the
that are
industry.
high launch, low spin.
Yeah, and some of that's just construction. You know, the construction of the heads. You know, they're getting more weight in the sole, more tungsten in the sole. So you're dropping CG. So I'll strengthen this up a little bit. So you're, the more you lower the centre of gravity, the more you're catching above the CG line and gearing spin off. So it might launch a little bit higher, but it's still not got a lot of spin. And so all these things are low loft and low CG. It doesn't matter how high the thing launches, if it doesn't got any spin, it's still coming in like an extra set.
Yeah.
So we need some spin to get some control. So this one, the base stuff can't get down quite as low as your current ones.
Okay.
So 225, yeah. So we'll see where that starts from in terms of a base. So we're at a 27-degree loft here. So it is a slightly higher loft. I'll just log these in here.
But that would also help with the spin.
Yeah, and technically, because there's less tungsten in the sole, it shouldn't launch as high relative to loft. So in principle, we might keep a similar launch angle, but just get a little bit of spin.
Ready to go?
Yep, ready when you are. Thanks.
Oh, that's very toey.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting with that. I mean, your path and face line, that first one, I know the strike was a little off. Path and face to path on the first one, it was nearly the holy grail, 0.0 and 0.1. It definitely looks with that, and this kind of the sequencing that the guys who watch this probably get bored of hearing me say is you can see that you move and the club doesn't come with you. So it then ends up being a little bit of a scoop and a little bit of a fetch. So what we want to get is if we can get the handle then coming with you, then you can cover it, which helps to get ball turf, and that gets to squeeze it forwards and get efficiency.
I struck that second one quite well, and when I look at the numbers there, they are so different to those initial numbers.
Yeah, I mean, launch up a little bit, it spins up, obviously lofts up, but it also, watching you swing, it doesn't look as clean through the ball. It looks like you're having to play a little bit of fetch at it, so I'll get rid of that one.
Fine.
Okay, that's really, and your angle of attack, decent, couple of degrees down, that's fine. But it still had that look of a little bit of a, I don't know whether this is visible on camera, of a little bit of a, I exaggerate, a little bit of that to fetch it through. So if we can get the handle end coming with you, then you can rotate and collect it, but keep that little bit of strength in the impact position.
Okay.
Next one, I'm going to go to the ICWT. If it can go in. 95. So kind of initially looking at, these ones don't have a flex attachment to, they just do 75, 95 and 115. So keep the weight similar to start with, but the bounce is going to be a little higher up the shaft.
Okay. Another shaft I hit the other day was the TGI 80. That weight was definitely too light, but it did feel quite stable.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, any of the graphites at, take a little bit off. Graphites at, once you get to 75, 80 grams plus, there's a lot of material there. So actually structurally, they play a lot stiffer to flex than steel. And that's always been, people who get worried about playing a graphite for, is it stable enough? But actually there's so much more material in the shaft.
But to people of around our age, we're around the same, I'm too old. If you remember the old graphite stock iron shaft, it always felt like there's more glue than there was carbon fibre in it.
That's probably not incorrect. I think that was the problem to make them cost effective back then. They had to be ropey quality.
Yeah.
So and I think part of the problem back then was that you're going from like heavy 120, 130 gram steels into a 70 gram, 80 gram high balance point graphite. There was just nothing to feel. So they got I guess you could argue rightly, a bit of a bad reputation because the quality was rotten back then, in irons in particular. But yeah, the quality out there now is so far beyond where it started.
fraction thin, but not terrible.
Less of a fetch. So as you can tell from this, that Dan is a brilliant foursomes partner. Should be.
I drive it straight.
I think your average shot shake's about a foot at the moment, isn't it?
I drive it straight and I putt well, but irons actually on the course would be by far, I've missed far too many greens on the course.
Right.
I've always been better on a range than I have been on the course.
Is that where on the course the ball sit down a little bit more, almost getting into the base of it a little bit more, getting clean? Is it contact or dispersion?
Dispersion.
Yeah. Okay, that was a little bit stronger. Okay, that still doesn't look quite right. It still looks a little bit hard. It doesn't look quite as free through the ball as I'd like to see it, but better than
Okay.
Definitely better. I mean, consistency of yardage there. 0.2 of a yard in it from a carry point of view. Definitely better than the steel. So definitely move better. Don't want to go heavy. If we go heavier, then you're going to fire in the clubs because you're not someone who pulls with the handle.
But what if it was heavier with a high balance point?
Then you just lose the bottom end even more. So the problem is if we go heavy, so when we went into the steel, that one had that element of you went and the club didn't, and then it ends up doing that. So we go heavier still, it's even more that way. So the raw weight of the shaft, but the heads only vary a couple of grams, but so it's the raw weight of the shaft that allows you to fire from the top and have the grip end come with you and not have to shove the handle at the ball. And so for you, because you're not a handle puller, you're a body turn player, is that once it doesn't come with you, the only way in is that way.
Okay.
Right, get that out. Before I go to that, so I'm actually going to go into, I'm going to go to slightly lighter steel and just see.
Okay.
Just I think that's worth checking. Whether with that one it was raw weight or was it just generally the weight positioning in steel just not suiting. So I'm going to go into a Zelos 8. I can see the number on the shaft. This allows us to go a little bit lighter in steel. They're not overly tip heavy as well, but it's ultimately one construction is just going to suit you better than the other. So it's whether it's a feel rather than performance, but it's whether it'll feel a bit softer.
That's the bit.
I could see.
Because I know my swing is very much from here. It's very much. So I'd be interested. I'm interested. Put it that way.
Stiff. So with what I'll do after this, actually, I'll show the camera the amount of material in the tip of this shaft versus the steel fibre we've got, just so I think that can kind of help appreciate why steel shaft at the same weight is going to actually play flex-wise softer because of the amount of material in it, or lack of material in it.
That actually felt okay.
What's interesting though is a slightly higher launch. So definitely a different pattern through. So getting the weight back down a little bit was a good thing.
So the one thing I'm noticing compared to my irons originally is how down the club head speed is. Is that just down to being a longer shaft?
No, I mean half inch or so in the shaft length. You're looking at a couple of 1 or 2 miles an hour maximum. Some of the others have also been a little. So actually, what's interesting here, and this ties in with where the weight position changes, is your pattern of. If James goes onto that main screen, you can see the path face to path. Where with the slightly heavier, more evenly distributed weight, you're pretty much very small path face to path, close to zero, half a degree. With both of these, very consistent. 2.8, 1.5, 2.5 out to in. Face 2 degrees open, 2.5 open. So what's happening is that weight in steel having a bit more balance in the lower half is getting it, I'm going to exaggerate, a little bit more there.
Okay.
And across. So the bottom end's getting a bit delayed and a little late on you.
I think.
So it's just leaving the face open a little.
Genuinely surprised how stable that felt. I thought I've probably not hit a lightweight nip on for a long time,
Yeah.
something like the old 950s, and I remember them being very soft.
Yeah, I think the
But
I
then
think
I probably
the
had more club head
construction of the Zelos. I guess it also depends what the setup is as well. I mean, we're just over D0 on this, so swing weight's not heavy, so you haven't got a heavy head on the end getting it feel out of sync. Your ball speed very consistent, but again, that what's happening is it's getting that little late and the face is fanning a bit open, and as you face to target on that one got a little bit open. The other two, it's actually very neutral face to target, but because path's got across, it's just leaving it open and drifting it. So doesn't time and swing too badly from a strike point of view, but it's just getting the sequence of the swing a little bit. You're having to drag it across a little bit more to get club head on the ball. So I'll show you that tip wall thickness. So I know this is slightly heavier in the steel post. So that's you can see the wall thickness there on the, is that visible, James? On the, it's a sort of just under 90 gram steel versus 95 gram composite. So far, far greater wall thickness. There's much, much more material in the composite and the graphites, which is why they haven't got to reinforce the tip, which is partly why the balance point goes back up the shaft. So I'll pop that one back, because I think we can do better than that. I'll pop that steel fibre in. I think that's a good one to go to next. The steel fibre 95, this one is actually the stiff. I mean, the steel fibres play very strong to flex because of the amount of material there. So, it's the kind of one where it's a feel thing. Something we've always said, flex doesn't make a big difference. It's constant weight. Yeah, so we would pretty much, as a rule, always use the constant weight. So the constant weights are a shaft where as with most steel shafts, there's a progression in weight from long iron to short iron of a gram and a half per shaft. Rather than the parallel. Parallel shaft is a unitized shaft and the weight is constant through the whole. The raw shaft weight is the same, therefore it's a descending weight into the short iron, which isn't great because then you lose the feel of the strike and the feel of the swing.
Sean McGee can really also see you in graphite.
Of course he does. I like that you got his surname wrong.
You see, doesn't matter where you are, someone will throw a comment at you.
I did share it just before we came in, so and I did say if anyone needs a laugh this afternoon. That felt good.
What's interesting, so while this is heavier than the last shaft, interesting, it's still a little bit out to another path. It's heavier than the last shaft, but with the balance being a little more even through, watching you swing, you can see with that one, you get to kind of here, and then everything comes through in one go. You're almost able to get that extension through, whereas with some of the others, there's a little bit of almost a bit of a catch-up, bit of a flip, or that later, almost like you couldn't get the face back to the ball quite as well. That definitely looks a little bit more connected through you and the club through the ball. And we're actually just starting to see carry distance go up a little bit as well.
Bit toey.
A little bit toey. Okay, I'll get I think for that reason the composites are the better option. I'm going to get a couple of others just to compare with. So I'll go into, let's see, where do I want to go into with this? Because you've mentioned it, I'll look at the 80. I'll also get the 80 on the steel fibre as well as a comparison. Let's think.
Is there a 90 in the TGI?
There is. It's one that, because of where we've got some of the other structures, we've not added it to the wall over the years. It's one we used so infrequently. But there is a 90. And I guess there's a 110 as well.
The other thing looking at this is the difference in sort of ball speed and total distance compared to the Epics.
Yeah, if we go to the Epics on that, so we're generally kind of the ball speeds on the strong ones are 107, 108, with the Epic going to those 110. Now actually, it's not, I'm going to go back to the summary page here because it'll be easier to see. He says, I get the Tour light, you can see the strike dropped off. So with the Epics here, 138 across the board, so pushing 140 is the general efficiency. Into the graphites, on the other hand, you're getting a 139 efficiency, 140 with the Zelos, 138. There was one a little, that last was a little heavy. Yeah, a little heavy there. But you know, efficiency-wise, it's not like that Epic head's giving you that much more proportion, that much more ball speed from the head alone. It's that setup is then you generate a little bit more club speed, which is getting a bit more ball speed, but the head's getting the spin lower, which is then also getting an extra few yards as well. So there's about a 8 or 9 yard difference at the moment. I would say half of that's the spin, half of that's the ball speed.
Okay.
Next shaft, I'm going to go into the lighter steel fibre. The 80, yeah. The 80 that we've got on the wall is in the red because that's the one, the flex we're always going to use more in this weight. But this one's a sort of 84 gram base weight. I'll add a little bit more back to that. I think it's certainly fair to say there are going to be other heads that will give you a little bit more pop than this. From a flight strength point of view. Now, certainly from a spin standpoint, we're seeing kind of 18, or in the clean ones, sort of 19 odd launch, 1,000 revs more spin than the Epic Forged head. Now, let's say a little bit of that's loft. So the
Good question, and I'm not going to tell you who it's from. I want you to try and guess. Question for Daniel: what's the highest amount of clubs you've dropped out of your bag and forgotten about in one single round?
Oh, God knows. I reckon that's Benjamin Cove.
He's just retracted his question. No, he hasn't. No, it was Ben.
So both of these comments are from former colleagues at Golf Punk.
Another question from somebody. What bounce would you recommend to prevent him from knifing a chip shot into his playing partner's chest?
So they could be talking about me at demo day though as well. Bounce, well, if you're knifing it, well, if you're knifing it, then the bounce doesn't really. It either is way too much, or the bounce doesn't take effect. So could be very low or very high.
Ben, when I've got my new irons, I'll take you on for some money. That was bad.
Yeah, so that's a little bit too light. You can just see that's halfway down, lost it. Can't use the weight to keep developing the speed onto that. So, okay. Right, interesting. So actually, what that means, the TGI 80 is a little higher balance than this,
So that'll feel
and no
even
extra
lighter.
weight. So you're going to lose the bottom end a little bit more as well. So that's not necessarily one that I'd be looking at. I might get back to that. I think what we're seeing really, especially taking into account the starting point with the flight control 90s in that as well, is that between the two look to be very, very, very close.
Yeah, and in the shorter irons, I've really liked that shaft. It's just in the 5 and 6, and it can do, and it's probably as much the sole as well, but it's a bit like that.
Just going back into the 95, I'm just going to have a little fiddle around with the balance of it. Let's see, that's it. That's slightly heavier than the last time. That's just under D1.
But yeah, I really like the look and the feel of this, but I think I need a bit more help, maybe.
Okay, that's more whole face to pass any 0.7 of a degree there. So I think there are heads that are just going to give you a little bit more heat off the face.
Bit heavy.
Let me get a slightly different. I'll get a couple of different heads just to see. Some of it might be turf interaction. It can be weight positioning within the head can change delivery patterns a little bit. So I'll get a couple of others. If we're looking for something to give speed off the face, I'll get, where's it gone? That one, the new PXG. I'll get the 770, which is good for that, whilst keeping the sole shape nice and clean. Let's see. So neat sole shape, but a more forward flight. It does it, doesn't it? Got the 525. Let's see.
I've hit the ZX5, I quite like that. And I wouldn't mind trying one of the new prototype concepts as well.
Yeah, they have been done. They're so let's go. I'll get a few of these so we can go through them. I'm going to have a look at. I'll grab them all so we can compare them. Okay. Actually, the other one that might well be worth a look is the 923 forged, which is proving quite strong. So the one Dan's just mentioned, which we just got in, the proto concepts are the heads that Lydia Coe's been using. They literally just come into UK to run the distributors over here, and you know, interesting from a design point of view. In principle, they've literally just gone into the demo rack today. So I've not done much if any testing with them at all. In principle, they look similar on ball flight, with different amounts of, they've got a kind of a blade with a small cavity in as well, but different amounts of forgiveness. So you can see sole width progression there as well. So something like that for Dan I wouldn't go with, because it's got a higher back and a wider sole. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they perform. They're a premium Asian model. I'm going to have a look at the.
It's got a really nice simple look to them.
Yeah, let's go with that one. So, well, you might as well start with that, seeing as it's. So this is the CO5, which is they do the blade 3, 5, and 7. The 7, the sole width is a little bit chunky, I think so. See, I don't believe these are going to be quite as strong a flight as some other heads. Certainly from what I've seen with them, they're more kind of the trajectory seems to retain across the models, but just forgiveness develop. So it's whether it ends up a little bit flighty still, almost sort of similar to that Mizuno, where it's just not quite enough punch from the top of the flight at the Mizuno to match up to where your current, or get close to where your current ones are. So weigh this up a little.
It's really tough because you need clubs you like the look of, and you need them to perform.
Enjoying your stripe show?
Well, I can say I've brought an audience that would never have watched the channel before. They might never watch it again.
If that's the case, we'll have to do regulars. So only thing is, it's a much weaker loft, much more traditional loft. So with these, for where you need them to get to, it's going to involve a lot of bending. So it's a 30-degree loft. So where the Epic's are 25 and we're looking at Mizuno 27, the only problem with that is we're going to be putting a lot of offset, and a lot of bend. And that's not. Don't really want to be stressing this this hosel quite as much. So
let's just give it a hit.
We'll give it a hit. Look at show where that differentiation in flight comes in. But yeah, I'd say it's a pretty interesting. The sole shape reminds me of the old MX 2025s.
Very toey.
Very traditional forged head sound, isn't it? I'm interested in they're seeing a spin at 5,000. Obviously, loft's going to do a lot of that.
Look really good behind the ball.
God, yeah, it's gone into orbit. Yeah. So look like they're going to be great at retaining flight,
Which I know is something
probably
you
about your
need
A-time.
for a lot of golfers.
Yeah, and then there's especially with where the current heads, you want it to go forward. So a lot of the tech and the current heads are great, but actually for a lot of golfers, we need to keep flight. So, so that will be a head that you can get some forgiveness and some flight, but for you it just means it just pops up in the air and doesn't go anywhere. But that again is where Dan gets to at impact, is much more much more here. I'm going to exaggerate it. Kind of gets there at strike rather than there. So dynamically delivering a little bit more loft. So the higher flight just really not necessary. So lovely sound though.
I didn't strike either of those, and it's yeah, it still sounded good.
So let's go to. I'm going to go to the 923 Ford. So quite a clean sole shape there. Nice sort of fairly tight leading edge. And this is the 923 Ford. So definitely a stronger head than the previous models from a flight and distance point of view. I think that it's almost like they've just decided just to stretch the JPX model out a little. I think now you've got the forgiveness in the MP range. It kind of makes sense to make the JPX a bit more of a distance model. Okay. Let's put a little bit more into that. Okay, I'll just cross-reference loft.
Question, well, it's not really a question from Andy Corso saying, love the way a fitting always entails a swing lesson.
Well, not currently. I guess currently we're just sort of talking about Dan's particular delivery characteristics, but there are always things that we can work on or help optimise delivery positions just to get the most out of our data and our action. So just making this the same as the 225 at 27 degrees. I think it would be disingenuous from a fitting to claim the equipment's going to do it all. It can't. The person on the end's got to deliver the club head efficiently and as well as we can. And if there's a little key that we can give someone to say, actually, this will help get a bit more out of it, then often that's 50% of what can be achieved. So it makes sense to highlight if there is something from a swing point of view that one can improve. If it's a face to path line delivery pattern, then then it makes sense to tell the player.
Strike's gone.
Just a little bit behind the ball there, yeah. We're seeing with irons in the same way that with woods, the way that the centre of gravity has been moving away from the face on woods. Some of the irons do just swing, but some players are better with more tungsten in the sole or the toe, and some not. And whether it's a case of finding strike and things, I think we're seeing that this year more than before.
That was good.
That was it. Better ball speed there. Yeah, so interesting. Actually, similar kind of spin to the 225 there. A little bit more speed generally. That sounded a solid contact.
Yeah, that was a proper contact. So was that.
Yeah, okay. A bit of progression, not necessarily quite getting it where we want to, but definitely a little bit of a move forward on the spin side of things to the 225, a little bit. Let's go to
Felt really good.
Head that's going. Yeah, it's a nice balanced head, I think, is a sort of way to describe it. In terms of it stays with the hit nicely. That I'll go to the Strixon because that we should see the spin drop with this. ZX5. Okay, just a very, very slight shade heavier on the head, half a gram. Again, let's get the loft the same. And generally, do you have a preference for cleaner looking heads?
Yeah,
Or if it works well, it'll...
I don't like seeing a lot of offset. I play when I think back, there are 3 sets that sort of, I remember hitting really well. J33 combos.
Yeah.
Which actually had a similar sole to this.
Bridgestones.
Bridgestone.
Yep.
I had a set of X Forged that the guys on the Callaway truck built me when they first came out, the first X Forged. And when I was playing 3 or 4 times a week, I had a set of I think, were they the Callaway X blades? The first blade Callaway did as a modern club.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of weight high and low.
Yes. Yeah.
And for a blade, they were very forgiving actually.
Mm.
But I was playing 3 times a week, so there was no children involved. There was no girlfriend. Be able to play a lot.
Yeah.
Couldn't think about that anymore. And the other thing I did years ago was get rid of a 4-iron.
Yeah.
So I've had 4 hybrid for Adam's Idea Pro, whenever that was, which shows how long ago. That must be 2008, 2009.
I was going to say late 2000s. Yeah.
Where most people still try to cling on to a 4-iron until a lot more recently.
Yeah, and I think with if you take where the spin is on your Epic 6-iron, then the 4-iron's going to be down at 2.8, 2.9. It's just not enough to keep it in the air.
Bad strike.
Interesting. So, this has gone just a very slight shade heavier. It's whether that feels like you've got to fetch it through a little bit.
I think there's also the element of just a few swings you get a little bit tired, so just.
Yeah, you can see from the head weight point of view, that's just becoming a little bit. That one, whether it's a little bit of ground ball, but that is lower on spin. That's closer to the Epic on spin.
Okay.
Which I would expect the ZX5 to bring the spin down. The restrictions have always been, in their more recent models, 300-400 revs lower spin than most other heads.
Try one more. Again, they look really good.
Mm.
That's better. Maybe a little bit open.
Degree. That one just launched up a little bit more, but spin relative to launch angles, not dissimilar. Okay, still not. I think part of the things with the Epic forwards, there's such a strong flight. Partly the loft, so.
And there's a lot of tech in there.
And there's a lot of tech in there. Yeah.
Everything we've hit so far has got sort of less construction to it.
So let's go. I'll go 770 and then we'll go into the PXG. So 770's been, definitely feels like it's been a reasonable bit of a jump forward actually this time round. Just a little bit more pop, a little bit more, I've seen definitely a bit more distance out of it. Let's pop a bit of.
And something like 790, probably too low spin.
I just think, I wonder for what we're. A 790 might be better for spin based on where.
Should we try that as you've built
it? Seeing it's built, yeah. But I think it's interesting actually, yeah. The 770, the previous model to this was definitely retained a bit more spin. This has definitely brought it down a little bit, but relative to what we're seeing from these other heads, to get that flight strength, the 790 might well be the better one. I kind of went to this earlier just because of keeping that sole nice and neat.
Yeah.
But,
from a visual, I prefer the look of these.
Nearly that a little bit more. So I wasn't awake to watch watching to watch Rory's tee shot on the last yesterday.
No, I woke
heard
up and saw
about
that
it
this morning.
Haven't seen it yet, but it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, but also the chip off the rock and the way the ball stopped on the rock. Have you seen that?
No.
That's also ludicrous. It's pitched into a rock on a cliff edge and just stopped.
Oh, really?
And he's chipped up and got it back onto the green. It's ridiculous.
When it's your day. Yeah.
I know he's searching a little bit, but we all know, well, I believe he's the most talented of all of them.
I was going to say, I still think if they're all on, I think he wins. Just.
But John Rahm and Scotty Scheffler are really strong with their mental game.
Mm. Yeah,
John Rahm's impressive, especially because it's a really sort of short backswing. It's quite.
Well, it looks it, but because his right leg doesn't move because of his foot being turned in, it's a massive shoulder turn.
Mm.
So yeah, base loft on that, I've got it close. Base loft on the 770 is a little bit weaker, so I've got it down within a half a degree of the others.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and Scheffler with his feet, he's like Michael Flatley, but has done it from a very young age. You're chasing a bit of yardage, trying to get the distance. So together he wasn't, if I understand, he wasn't that tall until late-ish, I think. But yeah, certainly as a youngster was always trying to catch up with them, and so would do anything he could to hit it further.
When you watch any of the guys involved in long drive, it's all footwork.
Mm.
Bit toe.
Okay. Very square.
That was good.
Yeah, a little less ball speed. Yeah, just a little bit less ball speed than the other heads. Okay. Nice and neutral from a line, but that's...
What's been popular so far this season?
So in...
Is anything sort of standing out?
I guess things we're on irons, we'll go irons first. I think anything standing out. The Strix irons will be popular. The Z Forge, the blade, is surprisingly stable. This is the Gen 6P. That's surprisingly stable for a blade. And because they're always a little bit stronger on flight, it's actually strong-ish for a blade. And yeah, T100S, MP223, those sort of players' heads with a little bit of performance are always going to be popular. Yeah, a little bit softer feel of the 223, that does well. 770 is always going to be popular again as well, a little bit more pop and fizz. I230. I think this year, yeah, 27. This year there's just a lot of good product. I think across the board. I think it just feels like...
I've hit I230. I don't think it's the right iron for me. However,
it'll just pop it a bit. Yeah,
it's very, very easy to hit for a small-looking club head, and they really shape the short irons well.
Yeah, yes, very much so. Yeah, it blends in really well
that's
down the
a big
bottom
improvement over sort of earlier.
Yeah, there was a little bit clunky in the heel side. Yeah. But I genuinely think this is one of the best years for product across the board that I can ever remember. There's just genuinely something out there. Okay, so flight's a bit stronger off this from a spin point of view. And that wasn't as clean a hit as you've had with some of the others as well.
No, that was clunky. Felt good, maybe a touch open.
Yeah, little open, so it's just let the spin get up a bit more. But that one, a little open, is as strong as where the others were square. So when that squares up, that's going to start to bring the flight back down a little bit more. Okay, there's a hair of contact to come out of that, but flight looks a better place.
Yeah. That should be good.
Yeah, it's in January, and so bear in mind we're still 2 degrees weaker, which is sort of 5 or 6 yards than the Epic irons.
Yeah. No, I know they're very
still
strong lofted, so I'm not expecting to necessarily match up the exact same, but I don't really want to lose too much either.
No, I think I'm kind of looking at where this is. We've seen you kind of a couple of miles now more on ball speed. You take that sort of flight with you want a 7108, so that's going to put you 153. If you move it a degree stronger, you're 155. You're only 4 yards back from the Epics without having to lose quite as much spin. Or you hit it like that and you're pretty much there. So and then again, that's then the cleaner hit, and so that head's then got the spin back down. Interesting. What was the law?
I would
Okay,
say
yeah.
it's
So
the best so far.
interesting with that. It's got the spin, the strength. Now maybe that's where was strike on that? Was that neutral? Right, middle there. So it's got the spin in a similar place, but because the loft's more, we've still got a bit more height. So it's going to land a little bit steeper.
Yeah.
That's the first one that's got it close.
That's bad swing.
Okay, let me just, I'll get, I think the other one that's worth a look is that 790. I think that's the other one that's worth a cross-reference with. But I think that's one of the elements with that particular head, I'm looking at the right place, is that, you know, the tech in the face. You know, one thing we were saying earlier on is that, you know, PXG, what everyone thinks of the branding of them and what they've done over the years, actually iron-wise in particular, they've innovated.
Yeah.
You know, that, you know, the elastomer polymer is now the X-Core 2 internal filling, supports the face, it allows them to go thinner. They've always been, their irons in particular, always been very good.
I remember when they first launched Gen 1 and someone came over to an event at Urban Golf. He came over with just a bag of clubs, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. And just straight away you could feel a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, the construction is, you know, I think, yeah, they've been the hollowed heads, they've been, you know, go back years, the TaylorMades had a foam filled head. The concept's been there before, but I think in terms of actually the materials and the face tech, and they definitely have sort of created a ripple effect through where others are, you know, they've all followed suit to some extent. I say, you know, like them or loathe them as a brand, actually iron-wise, I think they've really pushed the industry forward from a ball speed point of view, at least.
Especially with the early models, they really did look blade-like, and they look probably a little bit less blade-like now. But I think that's always something people like. They want it to look like a blade in the bag.
Yeah, and there's, I think sometimes it's almost prohibitive, and we do get people. It's about P790s are actually, for a head of the performance that it is, are actually a very clean head shape, and we have had quite a few people over the years say, "Am I good enough for these?" Where actually, you know, there's a lot of tech and a lot of performance in them, but they just don't look as user-friendly as they actually are. Okay, that's better. So again, matching the loft. That's just come off there, but I'll pull that back on. Matching the loft at 27 degrees. Keep the line neutral. So that way, from this point of view, the reason I go back to this every time is I want to compare apples with apples every time, you know? Rather than 5-iron against a 4-iron. Yeah.
It's a little bit bigger, but not huge.
Distinctive sound. A little toe side.
A little toe side, not terrible.
Yeah, so we dropped a bit of ball speed just for that. That'll be.
That was good.
Yeah, so interesting enough, just back up in spin versus where that PXG was. I think for you, what the PXG does, taking a little bit more, looking like it's taking a little bit more spin off, allows us to retain some of that launch angle. Yeah, it's not quite as much ball speed off that.
They were good strikes as well, but that was noticeably louder.
Yeah, yeah, much more of a kind of an echo to it, yeah. But a little bit open on the face, so the spin's up a little bit more, but it's not quite as hot. So certainly I'll put that PXG back in. That in terms of getting...
We haven't hit the 525, or do you not think that's going to...
I think it's here, it's worth it. I think that a cross-face performance is probably going to be slightly better on that PXG. I'm just going to put a bit more weight into this. Yeah, no, I have to They said there's a very light frame weight on this, so I'll put a bit of lead tape on it.
Yeah, well, busy, but if you follow me around here, I'm going to look at the calendar for you.
Yes, it's been silly season this time of year, isn't it? With all the, this sun now is hosing it down earlier on.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the prospect of the Masters and everything kind of,
Yeah.
season starts really, doesn't it? The players.
You've probably
and the
got out a
Masters.
few times this year, I imagine, but not many.
3.
That's 3 more than I
Three
have.
rounds, yeah. I'm looking forward to. I've got hopefully it's drying down at Royal St George's on Thursday
Nice.
for the Halford first round next week. So this is just going to the 525. So yeah, that'll be. We've got an early start to drive down first thing for an 8:20 match. I-525. So yeah, looking forward to that, and then we've got our grease true. I mean, then you start to play a little bit more. I've got a couple of other bits that I'm doing this year that I want to practice a bit more for. So
Oh wow.
well, it won't be hard to practice a bit more. It's not done enough.
You're in the
work over
perfect
years.
place to do it.
I am, yes. Yeah, there isn't much of an excuse to not. It's a bit like with the gym over there. It's a hard one to avoid. Although I manage it quite well recently.
So, Driving Range King is out. He said he's enjoying these fittings. Can you explain what the success criteria is? What the success criteria is for this fitting?
So, one of the things we want to achieve is get as close as possible to where those epics are, the original set that we tested with Dan, or club we tested, for yardage. But if we can gain a little bit more stopping power, a little more control, whether it's through a little bit more height or a little bit more spin, without dropping more yardage than we have to. I think realistically where those are,
Yeah.
from a power and distance point of view, is going to be very, very hard to match.
But also something that I can get through the turf cleanly, because that was something I really had issues with as the turf got firm.
Yeah.
And they've probably been designed for nice, lush American fairways. That's right.
100%. Yeah, as with 90% of heads, it's 50% of the market's the US.
That
so
felt powerful.
A little bit of a neater sole shape, so potentially that helps that strike side. Yeah, it's still retaining a little bit more spin. I mean, you could.
A little louder, not as loud as the TaylorMade.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things with this head in terms of where it was designed at. Kind of the i500s before that was that as sort of a powerful player's head. The sound's quite noticeable relative to other models. But getting into the back of the ball fairly well. So one could. It's hard to bend these with the attachment on in the loft line machine here, but something like the power spec, you're going to get the loft down to 26 degrees. That would just help. That's another degree or so stronger. That would help gain a few more yards. That was a nice clean hit. Yeah, so it's still relative to where that PXG wedge is getting to. It's still just giving that little bit more spin. So we've got to work the loft down more. Now you could argue if we got the loft down further, that actually helps retain that bit of spin. Could be seen as not a bad thing, but it's also going to mean it's just going to restrict the distance that's achievable because of not getting that extra strength of flight.
And also look a little bit offset.
It's going to start to back the face off as well. The more you take loft off, the more you're moving the face back from the shaft, so you'll offset it a little bit more. So we pop that PXG back on, see if we can get that same shot strength out of that head.
It definitely had the best combination of sort of some power and a decent feel.
I'd say, in fact, it retained a bit of that launch because of the high loft. Retained a bit of the launch, so it's not. The spin isn't less, but a little more launch still gives a bit more control coming in.
I did quite like that ping head though.
Definitely a softer sound,
Yeah.
for sure. It's definitely a quieter, yeah, and so spins back down, ball speed, similar, there's a little bit more ball speed to come out of it, but it's a noticeably more powerful flight out of that.
And the other thing is when you get a little bit of confidence, you can then swing a little bit harder anyway.
Yeah, you can see it
You almost do
pick
it
up in
naturally.
a mile an hour. Yeah, if you start to trust it, you'll free it up and gain, even if it's 1 mile an hour, 1.5 ball speed, couple of yards. Ripped. Slightly open face, so spun a bit more. However, for one that spun a little bit more, that's still
It's still
154.
I can see the...
Square it off,
Yeah.
you're 156, 57. Then you're getting quite close to where those were without having quite such a strong loft and quite such a low flight. 109 ball speed again. Yeah. So as you see, look, just needed telling what to do.
Yeah.
So squared that off a bit more. And I think what's quite interesting here, I'm going to just isolate a couple of shots just so we can compare ball flights. Because one of the things, going back to the question a moment ago sorry, I've forgotten who asked the question about what was the MO for the fitting today. But one of the things to consider here is what the ball does when it comes down. So I'm going to add in land angle and height. So on that last shot there, land angle still 45 degrees. That's a bit of a magic number fitting wise in that it's coming down with enough height to get some control rather than just relying on spin. 85 feet height. So that's really pretty good. Again, 90 feet, 30 yards is again sort of one of those numbers that at reasonable bit of speed, if you can get up to that, that's great. If I compare with the shot with your original
Did we go with Pro V1X?
This one's Pro V1.
Pro V1.
So 77 feet, so 8 feet lower with your Epic forged, but land angle's 3 degrees shallower. 41.7 versus 45.2. So actually what that means coming into a green, yes, it's 3 yards longer carry with the Epic forge, but it's a few yards longer after it lands as well.
And that number is very similar across the two.
Yeah, so it's very much apples for apples in that respect. So actually you could argue that for a weaker loft to generate the same ball speed, that's where that head's quite impressive. So the MO was get the same sort of distance but without compromising on a bit more control landing on the green. Great. Honestly, I didn't think that was, I thought we were properly stretching it to get that, but to be that close for carry distance and pick up almost, it's 7% of land angle.
Interestingly, I tried the new PXG product earlier in the week, and ended up in a very similar spec. Theirs was the private reserve version of the shaft, but I-95 stiff.
It shows you it's why those flight control shafts swing well as well. The construction works for you. Yeah, so
I'm just getting into the ball better with it.
A little less ball speed on that one, but still, 154. Now you could argue that again 44.5 land angle, 83 feet. That's just ball speed being a couple of miles an hour less, which has meant it's peaked a hair lower. But that's getting. I think that's getting you for where I'd like to see that land angle. We're getting a really good land angle and descent angle for half a club, which I think is a fair compromise because that one's coming in, 10% less spin as well.
What loft have you got this at?
That's a 27. This is at 25. So you could potentially afford to go a degree stronger and not lose. You're not going to lose all of that gain in land angle and spin. Certainly when it gets to firmer conditions in summer, that ball flight is far, far superior. Slight fade. I mean, the argument you could take is go a degree stronger, pick up another couple of yards. If you really need to stop it, that one's a slight fade, up the spin goes another 300-400 revs if we really wanted to push the distance as much as possible. But certainly that gets you 90% of where you are with these from a distance point of view. but gains a comfortable
And we're also
amount
with a
in
shorter
control.
shaft.
And it's a shorter shaft, yeah. So you're getting ball speed in the same sort of efficiencies in the same place. You could argue you've hit more shots, you're warmed up. That would be where potentially picked up some of that club speed. And this is one that the argument on shaft length, there's a window you can fit within. I probably wouldn't quite go as long as those, but you could afford to go.
Fraction short.
Yeah, I'd soon say I'd go a quarter inch longer. I'd go halfway between. I think is a good. So the word compromise sounds like you're giving up on both counts. I think with how square your path is through the ball, you could afford to play a little bit longer, and at least with the PXG heads, you've got the weights you can control. You can control head weight with.
That was no good.
That's a bit of Graham Gooch
Sorry.
going on there. So we can keep the balance in check because of the. I'll show the weights to camera. Because of the weights that are in the back, predominantly that centre one, we can get different amounts, or we can specify head weights from PXG. You can get slightly lighter or heavier weights to control the balance, and that's something that makes these actually a very versatile head. But I think for where we're getting the overall performance, I'd look at these and go, there's just not enough control coming into the green. We've got that extra land angle and control out of that, and a very minor compromise on yardage. So overall,
and looking at the sole widths are similar. These are a bit narrower, but there's a lot less bounce.
It's similar actual widths, you can see there, but the PXGs, if I can get the angle and the angle right, see the Callaway here, is that visible line, peaks back here. The PXG peaks there and then trails off a little bit, so it's a slightly more cambered sole. So for Dan, who delivers it at the bottom of his arc, sorry, a bit lower, at the bottom of the arc, I'm going to exaggerate, then if that back edge sits up, it's going to catch and literally bounce. Whereas a slightly neater sole shape, you get to the bottom of the arc, the back edge gets out of the way, so it allows the club to stay tight to the ground rather than literally catching and kicking. So that is where that little bit of a camber on the back edge definitely helps you, for sure. And it's something that's marginal, but it's going to show itself in our summers, because the ground tightens up that much. So you're right, I think just that hair longer. But say the critical thing is keeping the balance in check, and we are just over these. Actually, proportionately, marginally more feel for the head, proportionally relative to where these are. 38 inches D1.8. If you were to take the length, normalised length for this, you're going to be just a shade, half a point lighter. So just a fraction more feel for the head. And I think partly maybe what we're also seeing is where the flight control with a softer tip helped just to generate a little more popper, to trying to keep a little bit more flight on them because of where the heads are at. The non-flight control, one of a better phrase, standard steel fibres are a little tighter in the tip, just help to keep the flight down a little, allow us to have that little bit more loft without it kicking it up a little bit more. So both combinations sort of help. The shaft helps the flight a little bit relative to where the head is. I'm going to check the lie with that, but definitely that's a great that's head and shoulders above the others combination, actually.
I'm glad I sent you that message now, James.
I've just twigged, yeah. I think the beauty of being able to compare everything is we really can just zone in on just what are the merits of each individual product. And so this is just for doing lie. Put a little chalk line along the join between the dimples. That'll, when Dan strikes this next one, leave a line on the face. The line on the face will show you if it's pointing toe or heel, whether we need to make an adjustment on lie. These are pretty neutral, 61-degree lie. So very similar proportionally to where your current ones are.
But to your point, these definitely performed the best, but I could happily play at least 3 of those sets and enjoy them. Yeah,
I think the i525s, if we were looking to retain, to get you a little bit more flight.
But also the JPX forged, they felt great.
Solid. Yeah.
And sometimes some players will prefer the feel of something and would rather that than chasing numbers.
Yeah, and you'd find if you get someone who's a little more shaft lean and launches the ball lower than you, the 525 and the JPX would work better. And that's really where it's just the nuances between player, delivery, head style, spin. So you can see on that one, that's nice and easy. So just got a little bit up the face. I've got to catch the light right. I'll let James adjust to that. You can see that line on the face. That's absolutely a ramrod square up the face that shows lie absolutely neutral. Okay. So slightly higher up the face, but there's just a little bit. We'll do just due diligence. We'll just double check being just a fraction of matte ball, but. Yeah, that just means there's no, because you're very, very neutral delivery. We don't need the club to orient the gear effect and try to get a spin angle in to counter a flat shot shape. I think this is the thing now. This year in particular, it is very much a case of certain head suits, certain delivery styles, particularly when it gets to drivers, and heads that you think will work very well sometimes really don't. Theory is great. Practice is unfortunately, well, not unfortunately at all. Practice is
that wasn't a good strike.
Not a good strike, but lie absolutely the same.
Fine.
Yeah. Practice is the bit you've got to go with. And Chapin, yesterday, in theory, I think it was the ping head, shouldn't have worked quite as well as something else, but outperformed everything. And little nuances in delivery patterns and strike points and how much loft you add and take off as centre of gravity is moving further from the face, it's moving around more. So it really is, you might think you know what someone's going to go into when they come in, particularly driver-wise, and then go, didn't see that coming. Yeah. But as long as it works, yeah. So I'll just note down a few specs there. Double check that lie, make sure I've got that absolutely bang on. I'm just making sure that what I thought that lie was, I'm absolutely spot on with. Yeah, so 60.5, yeah. So actually, matching, so it's a half a degree flatter than I thought that was, but so a little bit flatter than standard. Standard lie has got more upright over the years, over the last few years, as I think they're trying to guard against a right-hand miss. So standard lie's gone from 61 to 62.5, 63 in some instances, and we're down at 60.5. Okay. So a little bit flatter than traditional standard. But actually, I think that bodes because it means if you can get the club out in front of you, your hands are going to be a little lower than if you're having to compensate and lift up. So I'm actually quite happy seeing that lie a little bit flatter because it shows that everything's coming in nice. Nice synchronization. So yeah, they're really kind of noticeable. You can see on average, 44 degree average land angle with those. If I just want to make sure all the original ones are grouped. And yeah, so with those epics, 41.5 with the epics. So you can see spin. 18, launch 18, spin 3.9 on average, but land angle at 41.5. With those ones, 20 launch, 4.3 on spin, land angle 44. Couple of slight miss hits in there, just pulled that back. But once we started to get the ball speed going, we're up. Yes, you just, because of the formula on the spin or the launch, you're going to lose a few yards, but it's only a few. And so the massive gain on control. So yeah, very good. And so this is literally the first fit with these. I did a little bit of testing with them when we got them in very, very recently, and ball speed's really strong. For me, they're a little bit punchy on spin, but yeah, I think for someone looking to get a little bit more flight, if you're someone who either flights it very high or spins it up a little bit, I think these are really going to be and very strong actually.
There's a lot of forgiveness in there as well for a relatively small head.
Yeah, and
that's true of most of the heads at the moment.
I think there are a lot now, and we're seeing they're showing you with that kind of colour differentiation, this sort of tungsten pad on the back, they're showing you where they put the weight, even going down to T100S, the real kind of player's shape head, very clean top line, the amount of high density tungsten heel and toe.
That's a nice club.
It's still a really pretty stable product. So yeah, but no, good result there. Right, irons. We'll do grip once we've done grip sizings. Once we've done driver, let's go. Any questions on anything we're going through? Please continue to fire them in. Questions or abuse, we'll take either. So driver-wise at the moment, we've got TSR3, sorry. So this is one, how long have you played this one for?
I got this September, October.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't love the shaft, I don't think. And just some stuff I did the other day makes me think I need to go with a shorter driver shaft.
Okay. T-height, do you want that a little bit higher?
Yeah.
Just anti-clockwise, it'll come out. TSR3 9 degree, B2 setting, and a Hazardous Black Gen 4 60.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Can we cut that one?
Sorry, we're live.
Right, I'll get rid of that one. 9 degree, yeah. In the 5.5, so in inverted commas reg. And anything you've seen particularly with this club that...
On the course left.
Okay.
Which obviously that wasn't, but on the course
Well,
left.
I think that might have been a reaction to the previous one. Possibly.
Grab a breather. Right.
And ball flight wise, how have you felt trajectory's been?
Not bad. Pretty forward. Traditionally, I've always felt like I hit the ball too high with too much spin.
Yep.
Obviously, my club head speed's down, but years ago when they couldn't control spin as well with shafts, I was often put into quite heavy, really stiff shafts to try and get that down. You don't need to do that anymore, which is a good thing.
Heads this year, there are some proper low spin heads this year, and we're often now trying to, it's actually, sometimes it's interesting trying to keep a bit of spin on. So you're seeing a lot more of things like the, the Ventus, the hot sharp, but something like the TR red, where they're actually wanting a bit of the tip to kick to not knock the top of the flight down. So many more of those in.
And again, if I had a bit more club head speed, maybe I would want to see a bit more carry.
Yeah.
But I always feel like at my club head speed, and you might tell me I'm wrong, I want to see it chase and then go a bit at the end. Well,
and a bit like with the others, you generate launch, so getting carry shouldn't be an issue because we've got the pitch of flight to do it.
It's never been
an issue. It's more
just
get the spin to get it going forward. There comes so there's a crossover point where at moderate to low club speeds you need spin to keep it in the air if you don't have launch. Either launch or spin, is really important to keep it in the air. At high speed, spin becomes far more important because there's enough ball speed to get the thing airborne anyway, and then the spin at high speeds, too much spin starts to stall it and distort the flight. So, low spin at high speeds is the key thing, and launch or keeping a bit of spin at moderate to lower speeds is key. So, we're kind of around the 90, 85, 87, 90 degree mark here, mile an hour mark. But because of where your launch is, getting it in the air is not an issue.
Yeah, it's always a bit humbling going on a launch monitor with driver because people feel like they hit the ball a lot further than they actually do. And I'm actually aware how short I am because I've been on these enough times. And I've got to the point where it doesn't bother me. But
I think generally we've seen the last couple of years where more and more players are much more aware of what they do hit it. I think it's launch monitors, it's Garmin's, it's people are much more conscious of there's so much more information now that you can garner from say watches, apps, all the above. That okay, we all remember the best shots we've hit downhill, firm fairway, run out Gordon miles. But interestingly enough, I've had a few people of late. They've hit a shot in here and they've gone, that's wrong. And internally you're going, oh, I think they hit it further. And they said, I don't hit it that far.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like with flex. More people are worried about playing too little loft and too stiffer flex now, whereas go back 10 years, it was too much loft and too softer shaft they were worried about. So yeah, there's definitely a tide change there, which has been nice. It's definitely not as in sync as we were with the irons at all. Yeah, I think they're looking at, you and club are definitely a little bit more kind of, you're having to find impact more.
Yeah.
Definitely more.
I consider myself a fairly straight driver of the ball, and that's not at all.
Yeah, I'll just take it down a fraction. Let's see one more there. But if anything, it kind of looks like it's just a little on your back hip. That delivery on Plath 0.0. It's not delivery line. Yeah, what I can see is where that, okay, that's heeled, so it's faded back. But actually, where the left's coming in is as you're coming into the ball. If it gets to here, because you're not someone who drags the handle, by the time you get to the ball, you're through and that right shoulder's coming up, so it's got to go that way. So it kind of has that sort of effect to it. And then occasionally you're going to hoist the handle up and open the face on it. But that's not allowing you just to rotate and collect. But as you say, from a path point of view, we've got, that was a little out to in. First one 1.2, 0.2.
Attack angle is generally up. I know that.
Yeah. 3 degrees or so. But even that's got a little more variable, but that just says to me that you're struggling to deliver the club. So, we start head. What I'll do, I'll start with, I'm just thinking in terms of head weight. I'm going to check what weights I've got on the Titleist pack. I want to make sure we don't go too head heavy. Okay, I've got a minus weight, yeah. So I'll start with TSR3, so we're just looking at shaft first. Because that weight means I can control that head weight. So I'm going to grab the 9 degree in the TSR3. That's the 9 degree there. So if you're in hazardous black, I'm going to take weight down about 5 or 6 grams, get it just under 60 grams. I'm going to go TR red. So just gets it to 57, 58 grams, keeps the balance pretty neutral through, keeps a bit of, where Dan's got a reasonable kind of sharp change in direction, keeps the butt end nice and stable. But it's not designed to be a knuckleball, but I think we'll see where that just helps bind the strike together, bind the timing together a little bit. So just using a lighter weight that lets me control the balance a little bit. And I say the worst thing we do for Dan with driver is go too head heavy.
So last year I was playing about with a Stealth Plus. Wasn't fit, but I was given a head to try, and a Ventus TR Blue 6S.
Okay.
And that was pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting that the TR, because that weave in the butt section pulls the balance up. It means it doesn't get too bottom end weighted. I'm just going to put this in standards. This is the Club Connect's Unifit system. So this means we can have, let's just roll that a set of shafts and put them in any of the heads rather than 6 sets of shafts on the wall with different tips on.
It just changes lie angle slightly compared to some of the adapters, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. And some of the adjustments, the high-low lofts aren't quite as much. So TaylorMade, you can get an extra 3/4 of a degree on loft adjustment. So something like the Titleist adjustments will, do I want to go a little, could have left the standard one in there. You see, there you go folks, never preemptively change anything.
And would you have most of your shafts at 45, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the ones that sort of, you really see 60 and under at 45, high 60s go just a 1/4 inch down, 75 at 44.5. Sorry? TSR3 to match Dan's current one, and then the 9 degree, and Ventus Red TR5. This is the stuff. This is the reg. Again, just having all flexes, all weights, all shafts. We've got to go, and actually this sits sort of more towards the stiff for a lot of other shafts at the same weight, actually, because of that structural stability.
was a much more solid strike.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. A little bit open. Okay, let's see how. Give it one or certainly another one or two, just to see whether that's a little bit of residual. Don't go left from the previous one.
Oh yeah. I actually made contact that time. That helps.
Okay, it's just got a little, just looks a little, okay. Better dropping a bit of weight, but that may just have dropped a little bit too much.
Okay.
I think the more trust you get it, there's a little bit more energy in the transition. That just looked like it could get a little, not over the top, but just get you a little bit on top through impact rather than staying under and squaring. So I won't put it away yet, but I think just get something a couple of grams stronger. Yeah, since it was that, where got a little bit less up through the ball. It's a very safe flight window, but it's not a hot flight window. So we'd want that launch, if we can get it 2 or 3 degrees up again, we want that launch more like 14.5, maybe even 15. If we get 2,000 spin, then you're maximising carry and then getting run out when it lands. So I'm going to push base weight up a couple of grams. Let's go, that's the Aqua, the TZ6 and the 60, because it's a 59, 60 gram shaft. Again, doesn't get overly tip heavy. Let's think relative to. I kind of wander down the line and think about what I want dead weight and then balance point characteristic from the shaft primarily. I'll see what this does first before I get anything else.
Reading the messages that have been sent between the old golf punk group.
Yeah, the private. Polite.
They've
I'm
not gone
sure.
in too hard, to be fair.
Fair enough. Aqua TZ6 Gen 2 in the 60. Yeah. 60. This one's M4. So mainly for getting the base weight, the TR red is sort of 57. This is pretty much bang on 60. So it's only 3-4 grams heavier. So I didn't want to shift it much. Okay. A little bit more to hit against there. Okay. Little open on the face.
Yeah, that's the bit. I was seeing this the other day as well, which is a bit unusual, but that feels.
Well, face to target as good as dead square. Path just 1.4 out to in, face 1.6 open to path. So face to target 0.2. So that's really as we kind of just subtly jigger around with the dead weight balance points. It might just help to get that through in a slightly different pattern to square through rather than being left a hair open.
That felt good.
Speed. Okay, so I think what we're seeing here is I can see why TSR3, based on not wanting to let spin knuckle, however, going kind of lower loft in that to bring launch down and a mid-spin head is a more traditional ball flight. But I reckon we can get a little more launch and a little less spin from another head, just from a raw distance point of view. Okay, that one absolutely dead flat on angle of attack. So I could put this on, if I put it on optimize the
My biggest thing I'm seeing there, and again I know
TrackMan
it's
optimizer there.
And I know their calculations. I believe are they calculations TrackMan, club head, speed and ball split?
Well, they would say measured. Any launch model would say measured. They all just measure them at different points. So ball speed is a measured number, and it's club speed is always a little lower than GC core because it's measured at a different point relative to impact. So the ball speed between them are very, very similar, not identical, but the club speeds generally shift by about 3 miles an hour.
Okay, just so I was on TrackMan the other day, but that was outside.
Yeah.
And sort of base club head speed was 91.
Yeah.
And we got it up to 94.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, TrackMan to TrackMan, they'll measure it the same way.
Yeah.
2 radars and a camera overlay.
One more?
So I think what's interesting there, I mean, it might be interesting to look at slightly different head. Because
Okay.
I mean, that whilst flight at that angle of attack is pretty optimal. Okay, one, if we can get that up a little bit, then that will allow us to get a bit more launch without the spin going up. But I think there are other heads that will allow us to go a bit more launch and keep spin down as well. So I'm going to, just with that, I'm just going to shift to a head that should help to get that little bit of a hotter flight. And we actually have done quite a few TSR3s this year based on the fact that it isn't crazy low on spin. You know, it helps retain a little bit of spin and you know, keep the ball in the air rather than dipping it off. So it has actually been very say popular. It's the wrong word, popular. It's actually been a very good head for that. But I think for yourself, we can probably get a slightly hotter flight out of something else. I'm going to get a Paradigm triple diamond, but I'm going to have the weight in the back, just so it literally doesn't knuckle. So I'm going to take both lofts with me just to see if one comes out a little bit spin or a little low spin, I can just switch it over. Because I'm not 100% sure what loft. I'm going to use if I use the 9 and loft it up, it's going to close the face.
Which I don't like the look of.
Yeah, I'm going to use because we can potentially get like the torque sleeves where we can go the high loft and take it down a little bit more. But again, that also helps to not make it too much of a knuckleball on spin as well.
So because so much stuff gets sent my way to try, I did bring a couple other bits and pieces.
Okay, yeah.
So there's a G430 Max and a G430 LST, and also the Wilson Dynapower, which I've hit
That would
on
be
the
an
range.
interesting one, because it's seen very good reports of.
Yeah, it's a good looking head, it feels good, feels quite powerful.
Triple diamond, 10.5 with the heavyweight at the back. Yeah, and it definitely appeared to be some very good reports on that Wilson, and some of the numbers I've seen look quite impressive actually. I can see that.
I think with price points going up, there's a room in the market for themselves. To a lesser extent, the Zuno and Cobra, I know they're a little bit dearer.
Yeah, and Trixon.
And Trixon.
Yeah, I think that's something that discussed with a few people recently. I think, yeah, price points have, I mean, if you put an aftermarket shaft in any of these heads, you can very quickly have an 8 on the front of the driver cost.
Yeah,
this year's got really pretty dear.
The Strixons actually feel really good. The 7 feels really good. I think it spins too much for me.
Yeah, it's not that low a spin. But it definitely brings launch down.
I know the guys
a
at
little.
Strixon wanted me to try an LS, but they didn't have one available.
Yeah, I think the 5 LS could be a very interesting head, because the 5 is pretty stable. But again, what I've seen with it, the pitch of flight is up that bit more. So when I hit both out in the range in Orlando earlier in the year, it was interesting just seeing that difference in pitch of flight outside. The 7 was noticeably lower, but the 5, it launches, but it's just that little bit spinny. I think if the LS, I believe, is coming over later in the year. Don't know when exactly, but I think that could be very interesting.
That was no good. So when I look at this, I can really see the face.
Okay.
And that's unusual for me.
Right. Yep.
I think I can bring that down a touch.
In a good way or a bad way?
Bad way.
Okay, because it makes it feel like it's got loads of loft and gonna.
Yeah. But that's just one swing. But visually, I quite like the look. It reminds me of the old FT Tour, which I used to love.
Okay, let's see where that's. So a little more launch. Okay, so I'm gonna change the weight around and actually put a bit more loft on it. Yeah, gonna go because I lofted that down. I'm gonna go more to a more standard loft and put the weight at the front.
Okay.
See whether we get enough extra launch angle. Yeah, so just putting it in the standard position there. If we get enough extra launch angle from the loft and can keep the spin there or even get it a bit lower, where that just helps that rainbow flight to kick as much on it as possible. And this is where, from a fitting point of view, we'd always be balancing up. If you get someone who's not a straight hitter, then you want a bit of a safer ball flight. If you get someone who's a straight hitter, then you know what, you can afford to let it go there a bit with the trajectory, because if it's running out down the fairway, it's fine. If it's nose diving into the rough, it's absolutely not fine. So you've got to take a bit of a call at, you know, we could probably afford to have marginally more dispersion for Dan because he's very straight generally. Yeah, you can give up a little bit of straightness to see if we can squeeze that little bit extra yardage out of it.
Yeah.
So that was putting the heavy weight at the front, which pulls the CG low and forward, which and I put the loft up a little bit, which then pulls the spin down. So we've got more loft to get the launch up, but then the weight forward to counter that extra loft from a spin point of view and keep the flight forwards. That's the theory anyway. It'll feel different to swing a bit as well with that CG change. Sounds slightly higher on the face, that one.
That was.
But I mean, case in point though, 15.9 launch 2-1 spin. So it would have slightly higher on the face, would have just exaggerated that launch angle a touch, but it's not push spin up. That'll be an interesting one. Yeah, okay, so a little bit open on the face. We've got a little bit more flight. Okay, I'll leave the head for the moment. I'm just going to cross-reference a couple of other shafts. It's not, the base weight looks quite nice around the pretty much on the 60 gram mark. I'm going to just change the not necessarily profile, but certainly the just change the shaft up a little bit. I'm going to get 2 or 3 to compare with. So that TR is a little light, so that can go back up on the rack there. So I basically want pretty much bang on 60 grams, which there aren't that many. Most shafts come in the high end of the weight category, so 65 to 70, 55 to 60, 75 to 80. There aren't many that sit in the bottom end of that. I'm going to get, I'll see that's maybe a fraction heavier, but the balance point is a bit higher. That's worth a comparison. 60 worked. I'm going to go, I'm going to 62, but let's see on the TPTs. New paint job coming soon for those. We'll be getting those in very shortly. He's not quite an auto flex man, that's a little bit too light. Bang on 60. I'm going to see these two first. I think we can.
Getting abuse from the better half now as well.
At least she waited to the second half.
Actually, it's not abuse.
So this is the TBT, this is the red range, which is the power range. It's getting a graphics change imminently. The 17 in the high, but I chose the high because it's not as tip heavy. The low is quite tip stable, tip heavy. This one's a little, yeah, which is the power range from a, so it's getting the yellow paint job very soon. We'll be getting those in hopefully probably next week. It's the same shaft underneath. It's just making the graphics a little bit more visible. So
yeah, I've seen some pictures Jason Day using it, and
yeah, they're making a bit more of a push. You know, it's yeah, you've got the gold range, the nitro range coming later in the year, which are they're, as far as I understand, they're structurally a little bit firmer. So these ones are very smooth feeling shaft.
okay.
I think with the original series and the current kind of red low and high, even the low's quite stable, but it's not a hard feeling shaft. And so what they've done with the nitro range, I believe, is made it a little bit more stout and focused on a little bit lighter.
Does that swing weight heavier?
So it did swing weight a little bit heavier, so I've had to just change the head weight slightly.
It feels, to be honest, it feels better.
Okay.
Just at address. I know that's.
Yes, there's a little bit more natural swing weight in the shaft from a balance point of view.
So with that, I could feel it all the way through the swing.
Okay.
With the others, they felt a little bit light.
Lose it a little bit. Okay.
I don't know what the numbers were on that, and that's a different question
Quite as
altogether.
good. Yeah, not quite as good, but slightly lower strike on the face as well, so that'll affect it a bit.
It's actually a very cool look as it is, isn't it?
Yeah. The problem is that the logo's just not visible enough. So
it's not quite the same, but it reminds me of the Swix.
Yeah,
High toe.
similar kind of yeah. So it's not quite as low on spin as the other shaft. So for a flight point of view, not quite as strong. So what Dan's referring to on the shaft there, you can see if I get the angle right, James, let me know when I can put it. But within the shaft, you've got you can see the weave of the graphite, of the layers. So it's quite a, is that visible? Maybe just about get it. There's a nice sort of, you can see the way it's wrapped, the composite's wrapped underneath, and there's a, like in the top end of the Ventus, they got a similar visual of showing you can kind of see a crisscross effect, which is the material wrap, which looks really nice.
So when I mentioned like the TR Blue is feeling quite good last year, is there a reason you haven't initially gone to grab it?
Partly what I saw initially on weight. I'll see what happens with the Hazardous Blue, and we can, in terms of that working well, we'll get that and compare it with as well. It looks like once we go up to that sort of 65 odd gram region, it looks like it just starts to get behind you a little bit. This is the Hazardous Blue, Hazardous Smoke Blue 60. 6.
And this is what I had good results with the new PXG head.
Okay. Because I've got to weight the head up a little bit more with this one. Yeah. Or technically RDX Smoke Blue. Just so we don't get corrected by someone. Okay. So I've had to add a bit of weight to the head to this to get the balance back up.
No good that one.
So it's interesting with that, because that to me, I'll watch one more, but that to me looks like we just need a bit more guts in the bottom half of the shaft. Because that had, I'm going to exaggerate, had that look of that where it didn't drop in and let you hit against.
Yeah, the Acura's felt the best so far for that.
Yeah. I'll watch one more, and then if it's similar kind of thing, I'll get the TR. Yeah, so you can see the bottom ends through the ball. You'd have to hold that off, so it's through it, and then that would end up needing to steer it. So, try. Yeah, so kind of like the irons, can't lose the bottom half of the club because it's quite a strong change in direction. You as you start down, it's quite a big move from the top. You need something to help it stay in plane, as it just gets out of line for you doing that. Yeah. So I'm going to get because it's Dan's used it before, the TR Blue, just to compare with.
No more abuse, James. They've all got bored now, haven't they?
Just asked for it. Interesting, you can't see it as much on the blue as the red and the black. TR Blue 6, because that's something that they're stiff in this. That's something that Dan's used in the past, so it's interesting to compare that. That's got a +4 on. I'll just switch the, I'm just going to match the grip so,
Okay.
so we're not having that as a change.
Let's go roaming.
So what we've added in this year is the ability to switch grips. So we're gradually changing over all the grips. There's the Precision Golf mascot, James' dog Peanut. Yeah, she thinks he's got food. So we can change over grips easily. So getting a standard, I'm just going to grab one of the others off here, a standard size grip. If you want a mid-sizing, we can switch them over. So rather than having to compromise on the grip size, and you can also test with grip weights. So we talked about grip weights in the past and how they affect things. You can show whether a grip weight change is a good or a bad thing. So put the standard size back on here. So that going on there just helps to guide it on. Just to clamp that down a little bit more. This can make a horrible noise, so apologies. If it does, there we go. Slight squeal. And just got to make sure the butt end is completely on, because they can sometimes just pop off a little bit. There we go. So the mascot made the attempt to escape. So that then allows us, whether it's a mid-size, a +4, a jumbo, anything like that, we can compare the, put a grip in someone's hands that's going to fit. That was one of the things that feedback from something we knew we needed to do, but feedback from a survey we did proved that that was an important factor. So
something else as well, if you looked at my club head speed, you would never, most people would never predict you even passing me a triple diamond to try.
No, and it's a bit like with, yeah, but in the past you've also had like the equivalent of Stealth Plus, like Sim. Things have been very good for ball speed for not necessarily just the higher speed players. It's really about what sort of launch and spin you're trying to get. I think the triple diamond across the face is very, very good. But part of using the triple diamond is to try to get that launch angle up without the spin going up. So if you're delivering the face very square, let's log this shaft in, just TR blue 6, then if we can get the strike nice and solid, well, if the face is square, the forgiveness aspect, if your delivery is not very volatile, then the shape becomes not very volatile. So actually you can get away with how stable the heads are now, you can get away with a head that's a bit less forgiving. Slightly toey, but actually, so flight-wise, higher launch, spin down. So lost a bit of ball speed from the contact point, I think.
Yeah, a little toey.
Yeah, a little toe side. It just looks a hair harder.
It feels so different.
Yeah.
Weight all over.
Lining it up well just looks a little bit harder work to maybe get through. I want to pop that acro back in. And we're literally looking at about 3 grams, 3-4 grams maximum. Actually, the profile of the shaft from a balance point of view is good. You can see how everything's connected. It just looks a little harder work through the ball than where the acro sits.
And the
fraction.
The 5 would be too light?
Yeah, the 5 you're going to drop down to that 56, 57 again. So because you're dropping a good 8 grams out, that's 15, 14% of the shaft weight. You just then lose the driver, the weight in the shaft to build the speed with. Yeah, back to the TG660. Yeah. So still structurally a very stable shaft, but yeah, this is really about getting the delivery as clean, as well timed as possible. That's ultimately going to be what determines how consistent a strike and ball speed you're going to get. Or certainly more than anything else characteristic wise. Straight away ball speed's back up. this thing a little slightly lower on the face. Yeah, a little lower on the face, so spun a little bit more, but ball speed immediately is back up 127. So, okay. Like you meant business on that one. Little necky. Well, I'm going to get a couple of different heads. The general connection through is pretty solid. I just want to shift heads to see if we can get a little bit more out of something. So I think, what were the ping heads you said you had?
I've got a 9° max and a 9° LST.
A 9° LS might be a little low. Okay,
Give it a go.
Well, we'll give it a go. I'll grab both of our ones to switch in. I think the 10.5 from a flight is going to be slightly better. Same principle as with the triple diamond. So 10.5 LS, 9° LS. Let's see, from a flight point of view. You know, head I think would be quite interesting from a flight. Head weight might be slightly heavy. For the kind of flight I've been looking at, I was quite impressed with the Mizuno earlier in the year. We'll give that a, because that tended to keep a bit of launch. It's where the head weight's slightly heavy on that.
As I said, I had, and it's probably more along the lines of the Titleist drive, but I had some nice results with PXG this week. But that was going the other route, which was lower in the loft, so that was down. I think we ended up at 8.25.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so I had a hit with that it only just came in. I had a hit with that this morning, and the XF was pretty stable. I'm always better weight forward. I gain ball speed with weight forward. So for me, the standard, if that's the right word, model got a bit better ball speed, but pretty good for spin actually.
Yeah,
I enjoyed. Good for spin.
I actually quite like the XF. I got better numbers with the standard, but I thought both were good.
Yeah, I think their woods have been hit and miss. I think it's fair to say. This is LS in the 9, which my gut feel is 10.5. We'll see. Yeah. Okay.
It instantly looks more forgiving.
A little more scale to the head.
That was a bad strike.
A little low on the face. Yeah.
But you'd get away with it.
Your next one's from the short stuff. Got to take another head cover off, but it's from the short stuff. But that's more a function of the low strike than anything else. It's a ball speed good, but that launch angle's down at 10.5. So that I think you'd find yourself having to really kind of add launch to try to get, and that brings in a bit of the left-hand side. So if I get,
And the spin rate's quite high actually.
I wonder where they're getting a little, yeah, solid strike there. We'll see with the 10.5. It's interesting. The LS has been LST 430 has been good at it measures a bit less loft than some relative to stated loft. Has been definitely good at bringing the top of the flight down a little bit, but without being exaggerated on spin. So it's still quite safe for spin, but more through launch coming down keeps. So it's not a high spin head, but it's very much that kind of drops the base launch angle down is where I've seen it be really beneficial. So just switching this to the 10.5 degree head. Yeah. But it'll be interesting with the spin side of things, because that's where, going back to what we were saying earlier about heads this year, some just really shooting and some not. You know, a head that we've seen consistently pretty good spin out of, for you it might just be a spinny head. Yeah, it's so the 10.5 one. This is very slightly heavier than the 9, so it's just a little bit heavier in the head.
Okay.
Yeah, spin. So a head that we've had really good success with this year, and this just proves where it's player and delivery pattern dependent. So where just that nature of delivering a kind of it's not, you're not doing lots of dynamic loft actually with the driver, but just where your action's putting CG and interacting with the ball, it's just producing a bit more spin than particularly the Callaway head. But you'd look at this head and go, well, that makes sense. It makes perfect sense for what we're trying to do with the launch and the spin, but that head and strike point for you just aren't computing the same way as some of the others. Right.
I've noticed as well with that one, there's been a lot of tour play with non-staff players.
Yeah, and I think because for those guys, their delivery, they're getting, the tour players, whether it's sort of male or female, they're such good delivery patterns. If you live on the toe side strike-wise, it doesn't knuckle the same way. So it's a safer ball flight. Whereas with the Callaway, probably a little bit more dippy out the toe from a spin point of view. But if you strike it a bit on the heel side, the Callaway's great. But the ping just pops the spin a little bit more. So there's always been that kind of thing with a lot of the heads. Again, you'd use the TSR3 to maintain a little bit of spin. Something like TSR4 is a bit more of a spin killer, but doesn't launch it the same way the Callaway. So that tends to bring the top stays a little stronger. The Callaway's always been good at picking up a little bit of launch relative to loft. STZ 230, 9.5. Just lofted it up a fraction though. Yeah, see, that's the rub of it. I think head weight might be a little prohibitive without shortening it down a little bit. So it's just sitting a little bit heavier on swing weight as a result. That might
Good looking head though.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised with its performance out in the States for sure. Yeah, I got a launch for it. Okay, let me just take the loft. I didn't need to put the loft up.
That felt really good.
Mm. I say it's not that they've decided that they're allowed to make decent drivers again. It's going back to probably, I mean, the MX500 was a good head for forgiveness and drawbars things, but it's almost like MP001, MP630 was okay. 001's probably
the fairways, the titanium fairways were nice.
Mm. It's been a while since there's been a driver that you could kind of hang your hat on from Mizuno being up in terms of performance with the other brands. I think it was that the same way for Titleist were always a little spinnier and a little less long, and they've upped the game. Mizuno definitely much better performance wise. Yeah, 126 ball speed. Interesting if that was a calculation. Todd's always nice at calculations. I'll just see one more with that.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be interesting to see whether that spin stays just that little bit higher than the Callaway or not.
Probably feels the most solid so far.
Yeah, contact's very solid. It looks like it's just a little bit, if we go purely on flight dynamics, the triple diamond looks just a little bit better on spin to launch. Just a little bit. But that's pretty solid.
I can't say anything that's the best any driver has felt today. I can't say I've hit it particularly well today off the tee.
Let me get. I'll get that PXG because I think that's worth a. I'll put the pings back. I say it's a very stable head.
And Stealth 2 Plus.
I think as a comparison with that triple dome, that's worth a look. I think it's probably maybe not. It's going to knock the flight down a little bit more, so you might need to loft it up slightly more. But I'll get the PXG and the 2 Plus as sort of final comparisons.
Yeah, because I've got to get better on that.
I'm going to go 10.5 on the Plus, and I'm going to get that as well. That's one of the Cobras, and then use the. Out of interest, I use the 9 lofted up. Out of interest on the PXG, which loft? It was the 9 lofted down, I think.
9 lofted down with a tiny bit of extra weight in the heel. And that was with the hazardous blue, and it was actually really good.
Stealth 2 Plus.
But obviously there's a different philosophy.
10.5.
You guys all sort of fit shaft first, kind of fit shaft first rather than head first.
Yeah, because the shaft, the timing bit. Yeah, that's really always been the way I've looked at it. Is that it's a case of, you know, if you're not delivering the head true to action, then you can't really judge the head particularly. So that's always the way I've always looked at it, and that I just don't see how you can fit head first, because if the timing's off, you're not getting a true picture of what the head does. So that's just always been it's just my viewpoint. The others that fit a different way.
I think often you'll end up at the same result, but not always.
Yeah. I think it depends what your philosophy is on what the shaft does. I think there are a lot of people that believe the shaft does more than, in my opinion, it does. I've over 19 years doing this, I've never seen the shaft do much for flight, other than how someone delivers the club head. In terms of if you're looking at what the shaft, the physics of the shaft can and can't do or does do for, you know, it's going to affect your leverage. I know Ian at TXG believes the same thing as me, in that we both believe it's about timing.
Low heel.
Okay. And even, you know, regular to a stiff. I mean, Mitsubishi put up a chart years back of a bend profile of a Kylie, a Hina, and the Ilema, and there was 0.3 of a degree in launch and under 500 rev spin between the highest and the lowest of them. So they do something, but it's not something I'd use to significantly change ball flight. Solid hit. So that's solid hit. Let's see where. Yeah, solid hit, but just not as low spin. So launch angle's down a little bit, spins in that kind of middle ground again. So what that had, similar to the ping, I'd always use that to bring the top of the flight down.
Yeah.
Rather than maintain launch and drop spin. Yeah, solid contact. So if we were looking for a lower launch and not overly low spin, then I mean that's probably just a very slightly heel side, but it's brought that launch angle down. So if you're on a links,
yeah,
then the lower launch has a merit.
Looks and feels great.
It's a very solid feeling head. Yeah, and then going to
I like the carbon
face. Yeah, I think there were a lot of players that we had through who were expecting it to feel a lot worse than it did.
Yeah.
And actually, really, as you say, I think because you've got 40 odd layers of composite, it's a much more solid feel than most of us expected. I think remember the old C4 Callaway driver that was like a wet sock. Because how dull it went really well. So it was a really good head from a performance. This is the Aerojet 10.5, but it just sounded slow. It wasn't slow, but it sounded slow. So it didn't really last very long. But so I've gone to this because I've seen some good numbers for spin out of it.
Okay.
but the standard model to retain a bit of launch. But I have seen good low spin numbers from this head in the past.
And are you sticking at sort of around 10.5?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting with the PXG and that little bit lower loft. But yeah, I think interesting that the Mizuno launched quite a lot relative to loft. But I did see that in previous testing. The Paradigm launch as well, but you can use that weight forward to spin it down. This one isn't necessarily that high a launch, which is why I've left it at the 10.5. But I've seen some good spin numbers out of this head.
Very distinctive look.
Harder sound off the face.
The face looks very flat.
As in, yeah, absolutely.
Like there's a real triangular look to this.
So slightly higher on the face there, which helped loop the spin off. But low spin number.
Right height.
Turn over a little bit. I wonder, is that just getting on the heel side there? No. Yeah, still not quite as good as it. So far, it was the slightly high on the face strike that got the spin down on the other one. So again, with this, if you get it, if your strike point tends to be just above centre, by that I mean just in that kind of upper half, it's a very low spin head at that upper half of the face. But that's pretty central, and the spin's just popped up a little bit more. So, right. Only one more variant on head, you'll be pleased to know. Make him work for it today.
No, that's fine. I don't really know what I was expecting driver-wise today.
It's yeah, I mean, they're harder to predict than ever before. You kind of know in theory, yeah, yes, we know the Callaways are generally good at keeping launch and all the above, but actually the spin numbers are harder to predict. When they're good, they're really good. But they can be very ordinary as well. It's just going to be a little. Yeah. Well, they just do a 311 in the XF, so this one's just the 311. I'm just going to check one of the other sleeves. It's just a little tight. This one's the 9. Tiny tolerances on internal diameter. That looks like it's in the same. Actually, let's double check on those weights. Yeah, I'm going to be probably after next week. I might get a bit of testing done on Tuesday, but yeah, I'm going to start doing driver tests. My M4, I feared it was dying the other day. Sadly, it was just my strike point that was the issue. But, it can't have much longer in it.
There's definitely more forgiveness to be found, surely.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the flight's been so good off it that I haven't changed because I haven't been able to gain distance, and I've used it well over the years. I trust it, all of those bits.
It's a really nice head shape.
But you say there is more forgiveness now, and I figured kind of.
Do you have something in mind that you think might be?
I think I was asked this on one of the other sessions. I really don't have a strong opinion on it. I know that I suit weight forward for ball speed. I know I pick up 2 to 3 miles an hour ball speed with weight forward. So when I did one of these with the various drivers, the Triple Diamond, the Stealth 2 Plus, the LS Aerojet,
TSR4.
Possibly. I'm really just going to be guided by what works best, and if there's parity, then it'll be a pride thing. But good ball speed. Okay, I might just need to loft that up a little bit. But good ball speed out of that, and good spin. Not quite as high a launch as the Callaway. Solid hit. Okay, a decent ball speed. It's a very solid head. Well, that's what I found with it this morning hitting it. It's a really solid feeling head.
Yeah.
I think if we're trying for highest launch, lowest spin, Triple Diamond wins out for that. Purely for that. There are 2 or 3 other heads that are very, very good and stable from a flight point of view. You could argue almost a slightly safer flight, not quite as high launch, not quite as low spin. Be it that's usually the Mizuno Stealth 2. The Aerojet probably spun a little bit more, but from a highest launch, lowest spin point of view, Triple Diamond's giving you just if we're looking for bomber,
Yeah.
that's doing that slightly more, slightly. I'll pop it back on the compare but that is a very solid club overall. If we're looking for something reliable, stable, low enough on spin, that's in a solid place.
The one that felt best was Mizuno. That felt very good. Mizuno felt really good.
Yeah. I'll put Mizuno back
I don't
on.
feel like I made particularly solid contact with the Triple Diamond.
Okay.
But I suppose the argument then, if I do, I might get something extra out of it.
I'll put Mizuno back on just for a couple, and then we'll go back to Triple Diamond, and then. Sorry? 9.5, yeah.
Because was that launching quite high?
Still launched well. Yeah. And that's.
So is it worth dropping the loft or not?
Saw about. I'll see. I mean, that's certainly what I saw in the US. So my initial test here, I was surprised at how much launch relative to loft there was.
And ball speed, they've all been pretty similar, haven't they?
These few have been the same kind of place, yeah. Yeah, they've got your kind of high 120s ball speed. It's a very solid go, 128 ball speed, that'll be interesting. Spin, bugger. Oh, shouldn't say that, all right.
Let me hit one more.
Ball speed good. Little bit faded, just pop the spin a little. Just got under it a little bit.
Yeah.
It was just living a little high. Let me put the caliber on to see if that just should see that spin just come back down a little bit more. But then this, in any of the fittings, one of the things we're always saying is you've got to look forward to using it, and if potentially, with this, if you kind of feel like, am I getting the best out of it, then if it doesn't fill you with confidence,
At this point, we've hit pretty much everything.
there are other heads that are going to, if that Mizuno feels particularly, well, okay, the spin's a little bit higher on that. You'd probably be looking for a spin point of view, that PXG or the Stealth 2. But even if the numbers are a few yards longer, this is the Paradigm Triple Diamond, 10.5, yeah, then so you've got to feel like you've got to stand on a tee confident with it. So I'm just going to.
That felt quite good.
I hope it got that one. Yeah. I was fiddling around with it. So just turned it over, launched a little bit lower, ball speed up. That one just launched a little bit flatter relative to some of the earlier ones, but decent ball speed, decent spin. I think to a point, because you're neutral to slightly upward angle of attack, neutral delivery, neutral face, you're not going to see vast differences between them. It's almost if you're more upward, a little bit down on it, that's when you start to see real standout heads.
That felt good.
129 ball speed. It's slightly lower spin, and that's got the most ball speed of anything.
Yeah.
It's a marginal call, but that's just got. It didn't. Interesting over some of the early hits. It didn't launch up quite as much as some of the other ones, as some of the earlier hits with that.
Yeah.
It's got the spin a little bit lower than some of the others.
Oh, that was a terrible swing.
Yeah, a little high in the face. High in the face.
Not a bad, terrible shot though.
Yeah. I think the difference with this one is any of them, if you get them a little high in the face, get that nice low spin to it. This one, if you don't quite get it neutral to slightly lower, it doesn't kick the spin up as much. That's probably the main differentiation. Like we were saying earlier, there are certain heads, like the ping, bit low heel for you was really not good on spin. It was 20%, 30% higher on spin. But that's just, but then for other players, it's unbelievably good. And so just depending on your delivery and your miss point, certain heads manage that miss a little bit better, and the triple diamond just appears to keep that spin that bit more stable.
Delete that one.
That was a finish Bernhard Langer would have been proud of, that one. That was an impressive hold off.
Nimble for a big man.
Just got a little high. I wonder if that tee just popped out a little bit. It's got a little high on the face. But I think what we are seeing is it's small variables.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think over the last few years, all brands have got their heads better and better and better. So if you've got an orthodox delivery and a square face, it's pretty fine margins, unless you just find a head that just doesn't suit your delivery strike point kind of dynamic loft. Anyone who hits up on it 4 degrees with a 3 into out and a closed face is going to hit low spin. Solid hit. Good ball speed again. Yeah, so that's then just taking the spin down a little bit more over the earlier hit.
Yeah.
So, and we're up pushing the 130 ball speed. So in terms of overall combination, that's just squeezing 3 or 4 yards more out than the others.
Also, that shaft feels, if I did manage to pick up some club head speed, it still feels like it'd stay with me.
Well, I can handle it. Yeah, absolutely.
That doesn't feel an issue at all, which is...
No, the Acra's always been very stable. This series is based on a little bit based on the old SE80 kind of profile of a little bit of tip response but low torque. The low torque to keep it feeling tight and controllable and low spin, but the little bit of tip response to help get a bit of flight and get some feedback out of it. So that one may be a little higher on the face, but we're now starting to see that higher launch, low spin. Just start to see get your extra couple of miles an hour ball speed. You're then going to be pushing 4 or 5 yards out from the previous hits that were a little less high launch.
Yeah.
So for me, that head is better on spin and therefore facilitates that little bit more height and launch and carry and run out than the other heads.
I've got to say, 10.5 is unexpected. Wasn't expected, but I know it's part of the design of the head. But
yeah, I mean, so this head, I think it's.
And is that weight forward in this one?
That's weight forward, yeah. So it's probably playing spin-wise where a lot of 9-degree heads would be. That was a little bit, just got over a necky. But necky one, that's 2.6. Something that's up at 3,000 plus. So it's using the loft to get the launch, but because we can put that weight relatively exaggeratedly forward low, I mean that one it helps control the spin on the miss, but when you get it, it's just dropping the spin a bit more, so it gets that bit of chase out, and it is pretty darn good across the face. Even with weight forward, there's still a decent bit of weight back to give you stability.
A few up the toe that have gone quite well.
So, yeah, I think that's where there's just a hair extra in that head. I'd say there are, the 3 would be that. The Mizuno second batch spun a little bit more. Again, actually, PXG for you.
I really like the PXG, and I really like the Mizuno.
Yeah, Mizuno just spun it a little bit more. PXG solid, but again, 200-300 revs more spin on a solid hit. And Callaway just wins out on spin. So
perfect.
yeah. So I mean, as you can see, for players with a more quirky delivery, or this James got a question, so down so neutral path and a little up angle of attack, we're seeing very, very minor differences. Players with a little bit more of a downward or upward angle of attack, or more of an in to out to in, you're going to see a more obvious head stand out. But it still shows nipping around the edges, manipulating loft and CG, we can find the extra 4 or 5 yards over some of the other heads.
Niels is asking from a spin perspective, could the shaft make the Mizuno work?
No. So in case you couldn't hear, Neil's asking, from a spin point of view, could a different shaft make the Mizuno work? Ultimately, the head and the player are going to override anything the shaft can do for spin, because what that shaft's not, there's not enough play and bend in the shaft to deliver the head differently enough to take 600, 700 revs of spin off. So even if you tip the living out of it and you kill the tip end and take a bit of the play out, ultimately if the head spins, the head's going to spin. And bend point, you could probably shift a few hundred revs with it, but you risk losing the timing more than you risk gaining on flight profile. So that's certainly, I would always prioritise from a shaft point of view being able to deliver the head consistently, and then you're using, as we've done with down there, use the head style, the weight positioning, the loft to optimise that launch and spin point of view, because as I say, you risk losing a dispersion consistency by forcing a flight profile out of a shaft. Any other questions so far? No.
No, it's all for now. No more sledging at the moment. So you're doing
They've
all
all got bored.
Yeah. So a bit of a loop back with the driver. It's relative to where the Titleist setup was. We're actually raw weights down a few grams. This one says 60, it's more like 63. We're about 3 grams down. The Hasdus RDX before this and the Gen 4s are kind of upper mid balance. There's a little bit more feel of lower half in that. It's not a counterbalance shaft, but it's an upper mid. That one's very, very neutral. But that's a few grams lighter, and that's the bit keeping the shaft out in front of down rather than getting that way and flipping at it. So the slightly higher balance point and heavier shaft, I think you were asking about irons earlier, that's what happens with it. It gets behind and then you flick the bottom end at it. And so just the strike goes off. So slightly lighter on the shaft. Same, Hasdus Black's a stable profile. The Acra's a low spin shaft. So, neither's a spinny setup, but, tight feel to keep it with you.
Yeah, this felt like I could feel the club the whole way.
Yeah. And then just the particular design of the triple diamond paradigm with weight low and forward allowed us to have a little bit more loft, which keeps the launch angle up, but we can utilise the low spin aspects of the weight forward and the triple diamond. And lengthwise, these are at 45. So I think longer, you mentioned earlier about length. The danger of longer is whilst you might gain 1.5, 2 miles an hour of club speed, if you lose strike, you drop more ball speed. And it can start to feel unwieldy, which is why tall guys are all between. There are a few that are 45.5, and Zalatoris went up there, but he's one of the best ball strikers in the world.
So as I said, we didn't quite see the same numbers today, but trying the PXG stuff with the PXG guys the other day, my club head speed went up with a shorter shaft. Yeah. My ball speed went up significantly with a shorter shaft. Yeah,
and that's the strike, the timing. And we've look at Rory Rees, he's just gone shorter. Quite how much we're not 100% convinced. It might be half an inch or so. They're touting an inch, but he's just flown onto the last green yesterday. So actually, the sort of on a robot a longer shaft length. We did all the testing. I mean, this is going back probably 8-9 years. We're up nearly 47 inches on some drivers, off the rack drivers, for the premise of more club speed. But when you put a human on the end, if the efficiency of action goes, you lose strike, you lose more than you gain. So that's why we would tend never to go over 45 for 99% of players, because even at the pro level, the strike and the dispersion pattern is more important for ball speed. And as we've seen, you lose strike, you lose efficiency of flight. So I think going above that, you just, for I say pretty much every player out there, you risk losing more than you gain, certainly from an amateur player point of view. Only bit we haven't looked at would be grips.
Yeah.
Any grips in particular? I mean, you've got the, actually no, they're not the +4, they're a line.
No, and I don't
Callaway
like them. To be honest, I don't like the align on the back.
Yeah.
It's just
Have you ever used a rib?
I don't like it. Really don't like it. It's not for me.
It's quite Marmite. Yeah.
I suppose from your point of view, I know can be quite important, the final weight of the club.
Yes.
So if there is a grip weight and that
That's
limits
normally when you're going to mid-sizes.
Okay.
So there's the odd one. So you know, ping on the HL series, you've got a very light UTX, which is sort of 43, 44 grams. Problem with that is that then throws the balance off as much as a 65 gram one. So average grip's 50 to 55 grams. So if in a standard size, there aren't generally any issues on grip weight. It's only when you're moving up to mid-size and bigger that can start to, and we've seen for you, if we start to throw the total weight of the club off, then the timing's going to go off. So if we were looking at mid-size, then we'd be saying, okay, there are only a few to select from. But from a from kind of hand sizing point of view,
I've got quite small hands. I don't know if I'm
broad, not necessarily long, but broad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but very short fingers. There'll definitely be some jokes about that. But because although it wasn't so much today, there is, and you'll probably say this is old-fashioned thinking, but losing it left slightly.
Yeah.
Always wondered about something with like a +2 or a +4.
Yeah, no, I think there's merit. I mean, the better it feels your hands out and the less pressure, the less likely to drag it left, because the left comes from, if you're tight, it's going to go hard.
Yeah.
So relaxed, it's softer. And so that can help to drop in, to leave it there. So I think the kind of historical theories of thicker bottom hand slows the rotation down. And there isn't, if you go cricket bat handle, then it's, massive great hockey
seen
stick, it's
quite a lot
harder
about-
to rotate around.
About Jumbo Max recently. Now that's really
Yeah.
extreme, but it's
Yeah.
an interesting concept.
I think the concept of the Jumbo Max is, and they're much, much bigger, is that it goes, rather than going in and being sort of gripped in that part of the hand, in between the little finger and the butt of the hand there, the bigger diameter on the Jumbo Max sits into the palm of the hand there, so more like a putter grip. What that does, so Mo Norman, who did it, Bryson does it, but they're very one-plane swingers.
Yeah.
So if you're completely uniform plane, you don't need that hinge and that ability to recover the face and a little bit of rotation. So you're working, that kind of, there's a little bit of hinge, but there's less of it. So that kind of swing of Bryson's, which is all big body rotation. Again, Mo Norman very much there through the shot. There's no real arm action to it. So it very much suits that one plane, but it takes the hands, takes them out. There's still a little bit of lag and wrist hinge, but it's designed around that single plane and no rotation. Whereas the rest of us, once it goes under that handle, you see it allows that to rotate around, but allows a little bit more wrist hinge. So in terms of a little bit more drop and rotate, and that allows the hands to rotate around a little bit more easy. Now we're not looking for massive rotation, but it kind of frees the hands up a touch more. So, but if you're very much all big muscle body rotation, then that's where the Jumbo Max, that's the principle of why they might work from a kind of hands physics point of view. In terms of, I'll have a look at how that one sits in your hands. We can certainly, the premise of a thicker bottom hand, the top hand's the one that really controls the face. So yeah, so we don't want to go bigger in the top hands. We want to make sure the little finger gets round past the centre, because that's the bit that clamps it in. If it gets around less, as long as it gets past the centre point, you're fine. If it doesn't, then the grip can slip, and then you've got to hold onto it tight to keep control. I'll have a look at your bottom hand on there as well. Yeah, so that one, you can certainly go a bit bigger. What I'm looking at here, which isn't as visible on the camera, is how much you've got to close that bottom hand down to get it into the finger.
Yeah.
So so what I generally look for, if you hold your right hand out there, just pop your hand out forward there, it's as much that length between that knuckle and there as finger length. So you get some people who've got very long length there, that actually extends the amount that's got to wrap around the club.
Okay.
So then you need it fatter to fill that finger out. If you're shorter there, then actually you're in the tip of the finger already. So there's a little bit, that finger tends to, when you put it on, it hangs off and you've got to close it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to get one, I'm trying to make sure I don't hit James in the leg. I'm just going to get a grip that's a bit thicker in the bottom hand. So I'll get a +4 and a +2. I'll go back to Dan's hands here. So +4, which is equivalent to 4, it takes that taper out of the grip. So you can see that next to that grip, that narrows down, that one doesn't. But that one, you're not having to close that finger down as much.
Yeah.
so it just sits into the finger. Whereas that one you've got to close, and that's a +2.
That feels good.
So that's kind of halfway house. And so with that one, it just, if you take your right hand off and put it back on so you can see it, it just slots, that just sits on the grip. So that's really, for me, that's where, again, you're trying to minimise pressure, because that then, freedom, relaxation, release, but you're also getting maximum contact, so maximum control for least tension. That's certainly the way I look at the grips and the sizing from that point of view. Now you can build, you can get any type of grip to that size by just 1, 2 extra on the bottom hand, so halfway to the +4. So any grip you want. Now, actually, pretty much any grip in the standard sizing is going to be able to get sort of standard single layer at the top, but then just take that tapering out a little bit, soften that down so that it just sits a little more comfortably in that bottom finger.
And what, without going cord, what tends to be better? Like, okay, we've hit a lot of balls. Hand feels quite sweaty after all that.
Yeah.
But, and I know that's extreme.
It's a little bit of skin type. So I get slightly dryish skin, and I use a variant on that lambkin. So the Sonar lambkins have got a, they did a grip with Michelin years back, and so they've got a tread pattern on them.
Yeah.
So James will zoom in on that. You can kind of see that's kind of like a tyre tread. So it's not rubber. You've got different directions of tread pattern. And really, I mean, the markings get moisture away from the surface and give you some purchase back, but there is a bit of an edge to them. So for me, the cords rip my hands up, but I always found a tall velvet not quite enough purchase.
No, the two that I
So
came in
sits in a
thinking
halfway
about
house.
were this, but there's the new black version.
Yep, which I'll grab in a moment.
And then there's, what's the one with the green end cap?
So there are two. There's a wrap version. The green end cap's the calibrate. That's got the rib in the back, but there is that one without the rib. Yeah. So that kind of, it's almost sort of multi-compound-esque, but softer.
Yeah.
So with the lambkin, the Sonar series grips, the luminous green cap has it's the equivalent of their Align that has the Calibrate series, which I use the Calibrate in the Sonar Tour. I've always used a rib, but they're quite, being not rubber, it's quite a soft, tacky material. It's one that they've put sort of similar material in under the Genesis with the cord, but that has.
Try that in the black, I think.
Yeah, I'll get the black version just to show you what Dan's talking about there. So they have exactly the same grip, literally just launched this March. So same grip, just with less colour on it. And if you ordered even less colour still, so it's whether you'd want the lambkin on the top as a reference marker or underneath.
Oh, it can be.
Yeah,
can
it's the
both
same.
ways.
So like on where it's gone, that one, the pattern is the same. It just hasn't got the lambkin on one side versus the other. So it's whether you kind of use that as a reference marker or whether you want just you and the club face.
Yeah, I think go with one of those.
Yeah, the Ionics, when it gets warm and humid, really good. They're a little firmer when it's cold, but you don't get that same amount of tread to it.
Yeah, let's go with those.
Logo up or down?
Down.
Down. Great. Great. So summary-wise, low spin, weight forward, slightly higher loft, triple diamond with the Acrates Z6. So a couple of grams lighter, but very slightly more even weighting through the shaft, but structurally similar stability. And then irons the steel fibre 95s in the PXGPs, which allows us to have a little bit more loft, but it's keeping as much of the power and strength as possible, but we're getting that little bit more angle of descent.
And could always move them 1 degree.
You can always nudge them
down the line.
Yeah, without putting loads of offset on them as well. But keeping that, and actually nudging them forward, you start taking a bit of bounce off as well, so it neatens up the sole doing that too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well lasted out. Hope you've enjoyed today. Any questions at all, please follow up, let us know. We'll do our best to answer them as soon as possible. If you haven't already, like, subscribe and hit the bell button and all that stuff, remembered it. But again, thanks for tuning in and watching and the interaction. Really enjoy it. Anything you want us to do, let us know, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks
very
again to
much.
Dan.